special dispensation to come into City Hall and take pictures.
Oh, excellent.
This is the one I want.
Oh, from Austin. Things that have changed since this was posted.
Hello. How are you?
You guys need anything, right?
This is, no, I just wanted to see,
That should be up.
we have some handouts.
Somebody wants to get onto the,
Should I put them on the table?
Oh, we can go ahead.
Okay,
let me see what is he doing.
so we have three. So this is 1, 2. Probably more than you.
Oh, it's okay.
That's it, yes.
Okay.
Can't do that.
Save it.
In any particular order? Maybe-
Probably the funding, that one at the top.
This one?
And then this one and then the chart list.
Okay.
I
Gotcha.
could put them in piles.
Oh, it's okay, I got it.
I'll ask her when I see him.
You guys have good lunch?
We could.
We did.
What y'all eat?
Where did we go?
Zoe's?
Zoe's?
Oh, Zoe's Kitchen, I love that place.
Really good, yeah.
Yes, they have great salads. Where are you guys staying?
The Sheraton?
Sheraton, oh, nice. Didn't you guys stay at the Marriott last time?
Yes, we
Let's
did.
see.
So Sheraton's fun, it's such a cool old building.
Yes, it is, because it was a bank.
The bank, I think,
Yeah.
right.
Well, nice.
I can do this
Ralph or Joey, whoever goes up, just make sure you say that, let them know that they have a handout
Okay,
that's on the table.
okay.
I mean, they can see it, but, just a,
And the funding chart is what, we
Second.
sent it to be posted,
Mhm.
but it's been updated,
Oh,
because
okay.
the president's budget came out.
oh, okay, okay,
The president's budget numbers. in there.
okay. Oh, no, I got it. You guys go ahead. Thanks, so. You okay?
Is there anything we should say?
In a place where?
We should say? Is
Oh, no, right, wherever you want. If you want to sit right there, if somebody right there, the board,
And I guess I get here when I speak?
Yes. Whatever you're comfortable sitting. Nikki, you okay?
I'm good, thank you.
Need any help?
Question for you.
Not on Tuesdays,
When
man.
when are you gonna call together your committee to go over the landlord-tenant ordinance?
Mr. Davis, how are you?
That's privileged
Is
information.
that a trick question?
Yeah. That's privileged information.
How are you? Oh, good. Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Is it gonna be this week now? Monday?
Nikki. Nikki,
Been good? When you tell me?
I'm gonna give you this. You got it in how?
Well,
This is just devastating.
We were here last night, yeah. Drove up North Main though, at lunch break.
You got it,
And,
girl, you got
we
it.
hadn't seen the
Thank you.
part
Got
of the
confidence
dog
in you.
that was done.
Yeah.
So it looks good.
Yeah, we're getting ready.
Finish that in between, okay. Good.
Need some more.
Yeah, right.
Wanna do, wanna look at town.
Trail Road as well. You could use that too.
What else could we get other than Tiger?
Tigers, in terms of competitive grant money, Tiger,
Well, what about non-competitive?
there's all the formula funds that come down to the state and then come down to the COG.
Which one?
Those are the basic federal highway funds, but those are, you know, those are already spent in different ways.
Yeah, that's a rat race.
Yeah,
Let me,
it's,
I need to talk to
okay, it's tight times though. The president in his budget has a heck of a plan, but it's not going anywhere.
Might as well not have set it up.
Right, exactly.
He's a lame duck, little,
And I'll tell you,
few more months, he'll be a dead duck.
right, I'll tell you that, but what he proposed in his budget for transportation
Yeah, I saw it.
would have gotten
He's
North
not gonna
Main.
go anywhere?
It would get North Main, Faro, and some others done as well. Buy you some new buses.
I know where it's supposed to go.
Okay, but
Of course.
it would have done all of that.
I think the bus will take care of
They are, and they're gonna get some increases these next 5 years.
it. Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll talk. I'll call you.
Yeah, of course, please.
I think about coming up.
For hearing
And then
NLC.
Oh,
NLC.
everything else is.
That's so,
Oh, okay. No.
yeah, well, you know me, I always break away from them anyway.
Right.
Sometimes.
Oh, right, right,
I use
right.
my tide time to come talk to you.
Absolutely,
I'm gonna
anytime.
bring one back for Cliff. It's hard.
I'm gonna be writing about landlords this week. Are you wanna be in the story? Well, I'll call you. So if you wanna return.
He never calls me until after the story is written, then he calls me for one
Hey, Sam,
line.
here's what I'm gonna say. What do you wanna say about it? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, you know, weekly, all my copies, he calls me. And he only calls me when the story's finished. Then he calls me. You can always tell when the story's already written.
Political bias, rate ratings, crossings, that's, how do you distinguish the highway and this from the highway?
Safety and.
Well, no, this says highway, safety, it says highway, it says rail.
Right.
Oh, they're using, they mean rail corridors.
This is an act, that's an act of courtesy.
Right, like on the southern region of the south.
Okay, all right. We care a lot about that here.
Oh, yeah, but you can see how
She can be in the discussion, I don't think she's planning on
All South Carolina.
I don't think she's planning.
And
Hey, y'all, good to see you. Hey, I wanted to pass along, because I know you'll probably get a call, but Earl's father passed away last night. And I know y'all same church and all, but, he was 93, so he was, had lived a long life, but got went down this weekend really quick and called yesterday. And so anyway, I knew from church perspective, y'all didn't want to know, so.
I'll give him a call.
But anyway, they're having the funeral tomorrow
Where?
in Florence. So they went ahead and it'll be in the paper in the morning, but the funeral's at 10:30. It's taken at 10:30 and the funeral's at 11:30. So
That's the way we used to do it, you know, you die, the next day they'd bury
that's the
you.
way we did it. You know, in a small town, we always had graveside too. We never had the church service. We just had graveside. So anyway, he was Earl McLeod Sr. So same name. Anyhow, just wanted to
Okay, thank you.
say hey, mention that to y'all.
Thank you. So I'm not quite
And that's, and actually that's South Carolina.
She wants to be, you know, we had that Wi-Fi and Skype very well. She's not gonna be able to be a part. I'm not sure whether
planning, that's exactly what it says.
on TV.
That's money that comes down to.
She'll be listening, and I told her I'd have my phone note on. If she wanted to text me with a question, something I'd be glad to ask. Well, I just think it's,
Freight.
That is a new program.
because you see, we could very well end sometime tonight with 3-3. Yeah. And of course, there's nothing in there to say who can break that. Nobody breaks it? Nobody breaks it, so it's done. I mean, you just defer it to the next meeting. Motion doesn't carry.
Hanging in there, barely.
What kind of parade?
That's good, that's good. I mean, you constantly have things going.
Do I get payment for that?
Hey there.
No, now you know that. Why?
You got it already on.
How are you?
But he said, you don't know when to be.
Your strength is good. Now it's just the side
Come
issue
here, say what now?
and the medication. You know, so, she got a good report from the doctor at Johns Hopkins on her strength, and she was very happy with that.
Come here.
And, now we just need to rebuild her.
Yeah, well, tell her about it.
Yeah.
You better watch how you say that.
And it's very frustrating for her.
Well,
No.
it's had
Uh-huh. Okay. You just gotta keep battling along.
yeah.
No. First wife, Lee. Just have her, she got a diagnosis, 6 months, fortunately.
Don't do that.
Right.
How we doing?
How things go here,
Okay,
all things considered.
yeah.
Hold on a minute, let me try to.
residential on top. So I told him, give me 2
Let me
weeks.
have some hard talks about that.
Show him maybe some property.
I will,
talking about, but-
I don't step in that because,
Oh, I agree. Well, and they're.
one area.
You've got Hyatt, you've got a lot of businesses. And they're right in saying, anybody wants to pay today, but they want it available for the next.
Some days.
But there's height restrictions and there's. Our system can't take it.
I'll give you.
Anyway,
Okay.
you needed to know I had
I don't want to step in any minds.
No, you won't. I'm good.
Good thing.
Hey, you see how,
What are we gonna have for your luncheon? I'm trying to do it on the Monday, dude. We try to do it on a Monday. There are 6 other people that might be able to call that day.
She said that they were working on this today. Well, this one,
It's crawling here.
she looked it up.
Is Mondays a better day for you? Is that way trying to see
They tried to one of my series. So I'm thinking that what we gonna probably get, we gonna probably get 3-3 split. And then Bo can stay home. We report Bo until we get a replacement. So what I'm gonna do, Jessica,
Okay.
Here.
You had a word. Well, keep them if you're here, and I'll let you do.
Okay.
If you're not, if you have to leave, I'll hand them
Then
out.
here's everybody that their name on it. And it just, I mean, don't worry about it if you don't want it.
Go ahead and pull the 3 and give them to Nikki and their fedora. and
That's,
Devon. And you want me to keep these in case, yes, they're not here, okay?
It's the last second every year.
Perfect, lady.
The franchise fee, some finance has told me, that's again, maybe you encourage them.
Get the address. Get an address as to where it is. There's a water leak or some water stoppage back there.
Okay.
I don't know where it is. If we find out where it is, I'll have staff to.
You wanna keep these? Okay.
Yeah, so so just say Laura.
But she's going all over the place.
That's what Bubsy's got a water issue. Sam.
I'm good, how about you? How are you, gentlemen?
Hey there.
Hello, how are you both?
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Okay, I got you. That's all I need to know. Okay, good. Okay. So that's Miss Charlotte.
Anything?
All the,
Oh, okay, thank you.
Apologize. Trying to make sense of it all. Yeah. The let's get started. I think we got Tamika on the way. Mo's gonna get here since he did so much school, and Leon's not gonna join. Is she gonna join us by
no,
conference? Okay.
unless she changes her mind, I don't think so though. Miss Devine may wanna call in when she gets on the road. But she'll, text if she wants to do that.
It's just a letter saying thanks for visiting with us and for making our decision.
Are we hearing anything?
Not yet. That's what we've heard is
That's
hear from us.
that's from them.
Yeah, no, we just got an email.
Can you send this unique to print off? 4 copies? 5, rather? Thank you.
He left his briefcase in Washington with the money. I don't know what he's doing here today.
I don't think he heard you, Mr. Davis.
Ralph, I told him you left your briefcase with the money in Washington. So I don't know what you doing here today.
Good afternoon. We will get started with our roll call. Ms. Daniels?
Good evening, Mr. McDowell,
Here.
Mr. Duvall,
Present.
Mr. Fedora, Ms. Plow, Ms. Devine, Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mayor Benjamin.
Here.
Thank you.
Our first item is the financial report, which will be given by Mr. Denny Olmer in Ms. Alonzo's absence. Denny, give us your official title. It's changed over.
It's Deputy Finance.
It is deputy now. Okay, very good. And Denny will give the December 2015 financial report.
First thing I need to do is give you a copy. Thank you.
This was one from last night.
Yeah, but there was one number change on the Bull Street
Oh,
there.
okay.
Right, everything else basically.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
First item we'll be looking at is general fund. And remember, this is through December 2015. As of now, we have collected a little over 26 million, spent a little over 59 million. Keep in mind, we still have a few months where we have to collect property taxes, business license. Sure, within the next few months, we'll be catching that up.
What's in the part of your handout?
I don't have a handout.
You can move on.
have a handout for him?
I think I did.
Thanks, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Next item is the hospitality fund. So far, we have collected 5.1 mil, and we've spent a little over 5.5 million. We're only about halfway collected for the revenue for the fiscal year.
Repeat that.
Hospitality.
Yeah.
Through December, we've collected 5.199,945. Spend it 5,524,000. Just keep in mind, we're only halfway through the year in our collections. Next item is our parking. Revenue thus far is $3,261,500.
Excuse me, go back to the hospitality 1 minute, let me see if I'm reading this correctly. On the actual current year through December, we're at 2,797,000, and last year we were at 2,605,000. Is that the correct interpretation?
Actual through December is 5,159,000. It's through the current fiscal year.
Okay. And prior year, we were at 5,052,000.
Yes.
So
Well, actually, those are budgeted numbers.
It says actual prior year through December 2014 is 5,052,258 on the hospitality.
Okay, yeah.
And
I flipped over.
actual current year is 5,159,000. The point I was gonna make is that we are slightly ahead
Slightly.
in our collection, even though we've had the flood.
I'd be curious to see how much of that is maybe from technology, either technology at the garages or from the easier to use credit card meters and stuff like that. But that's encouraging.
Would that go into the hospitality fund? It wouldn't go to hospitality. I'm talking
Oh,
about.
I do talk about parking. I'm sorry.
Talking about
You
the
said
HTAC.
the first one was parking. I apologize.
So this time last year, you're saying
That's
we were a
encouraging.
little bit.
We're a little bit ahead of this time last year in spite of.
Post flood.
Let me add to that real quick, because I've also checked through January, because the concern has been with the flood and everything that occurred, because we did have a little bit of a slowdown. So even I've kind of taken an advanced peek before y'all had the December numbers. I took a look at the January numbers as the collections came through. We are still on budget, but we don't have a large amount of growth. We've had the last 3 or 4 years, every time we look at it about this time of the year, we've been ahead of budget, which has been good. That's created additional funds. So far this year, we're really just on budget. Even though we're a little ahead of last year, we also budgeted a little more than last year. So we have to keep that in mind. But as far as what we've allocated or budgeted out, we're pretty much right on for where we need to be.
Was the estimate 5% more?
I want to, I don't see Missy Kaufman, but I think it was 3.3% more was the growth off of the budget, and based upon the actuals, because we have to do all this before we get the actuals. And spring does have a habit of being a couple of good months for hospitality collections, so we feel pretty good. We'll finish at least on budget. And I don't want to say we'll be a little higher yet until we get there, but we feel pretty strong. We'll make budget on those hospitality numbers for the current year, even with the flood.
800 more.
I think it's good.
Next area is parking. So far through December, we collected 3,261,500. Expenditures like 2,957,962.
So it says current service charges down and fines and forfeitures down. Yeah, so,
Slightly.
and that's not your space necessarily, Denny, but I would be curious to see what if that's a trend. Yeah?
I will add, there is a small effect from the flood event as well. For about a week or so, we did not have enforcement officials out there collecting, so that's almost 2-3% of your fine in, not just fines, but also the meters out there on the street that we did not have reflected in, well, we won't reflect because we didn't collect during that time. So there will be a small effect just from the flood on our parking system as well.
You said about 3%?
Well, 2% of, but it would only really be of that part of the revenue. You know, you still have your rentals for the parking garages and everything else that goes on. But for the actual street collections, we weren't in full force enforcing during that time.
Okay.
Next item, water and sewer. Through December, collections like 80,973,992. Expenditures like 40,827,527.
That's good.
Stormwater. Through December, collections 3,877,788. Expenditures 1,867,10. No question there. We also prepared some information on the expenditures for the flood. Thus far, you should have a sheet that says summary of Fund 253 flood for FEMA. Sorry.
These are, now, this is income from FEMA? What is it? Reimbursement.
We did have one reimbursement from FEMA. We did have one reimbursement from FEMA.
Yeah, that was expedited, public
That
works
was an expedited reimbursement.
That's the 4.3?
Yes.
Okay.
And the expenditures are kind of broken down by departments. For those purchases that we had to make, you know. And the column, the unfunded percentage is the 25%, and that amount will be what the departments will be responsible for, while we're expecting the reimbursement from FEMA of 75%.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we there yet with what the actual percentage will be, 75 versus 180? So we're still,
I mean, it
Still
will be
talking.
the 75-25, Mr. Davis.
Yeah.
Of course, we continue to lobby for, particularly with the canal, a different, or more percentages being paid for, up to 100%.
We also have a letter the city manager has. We just got a letter from HUD today regarding the CDBG disaster relief. You can pass those around. Ralph, make copies for everyone. Just that they continue to hear our concerns and they recognize time is of the essence, but no decisions have been made yet by HUD as to when to distribute those funds. You can make as many copies as possible.
okay, good.
I do think, sorry, we'll talk flood later.
Yeah.
Please. Go ahead, Denny.
Okay, our next sheet is the Bull Street Common Summary of Revenues and Expenditures. Actually, there are expenditures.
Be helpful.
And we are showing the 454,897 thus far of expenditures. And the next sheet is the multi-use entertainment venue. It's the bond that was issued and the expenses that has been applied to it.
Am I reading it correctly here that the attorney's fees were $481,000 and the financial advisor was additional $2,002,000?
Yes.
Less than $1 million for those two items on the expense.
Yeah, that's correct.
Just wanted to point that out, that it cost a lot of money.
And the next item is the Bull Street projects, not funded by the hospitality bond. We have a water project, sewer project, storm drain project, and projects from the general fund.
CP. That's the CP project.
That's capital projects. Also in your packet, you have our CIP projects. We have them listed by the water projects, water and sewer projects, stormwater improvement projects, parking projects, and projects funded by the general fund. So that's a number of projects that we have.
Just a comment. We got the summary of some of the
Properties.
CIP projects. Had some specifics a few days ago, I believe. I was just looking at some of the ones in the North Columbia area. Can I have a conversation with some folks about that?
Absolutely. Was it stormwater or was it water sewer?
There was stormwater. Thank you. You gonna set it up? You want me to set it up?
I will. I'll get it sent up. That, and what was said earlier was, not what will be brought forth to council in the coming months, but we certainly can have.
Yeah, that one gave the status of the commitment to it. Yeah. Thank you.
Would there be any questions or concerns? Or?
Any other questions, Danny? Thank you, Danny.
Good report.
Thank you, Danny. Our next item will begin our council discussion of legislative briefings that we're very excited to have our federal lobbyist in town with us. He's been with us for many, many years, and he travels usually around this time of the year for the new councilmen to give a briefing to city council and also meet with our staff and the different departments as they may have interest in some particular federal issues and federal funding streams. Ralph Barbushian with Capital Edge.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be here. I'm also going to introduce my colleague, Joy Griewatz, who's been with us for 6 years now? 6 years. So should I, will this go through the slides?
It should. I don't
Okay.
know
I'm
if
sorry.
they've given you the
This looks.
ability to do it yourself, Ralph. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to try to leave time for you all to ask questions, so I'll try to go through this in not too much detail, because I know that's something I tend to do sometimes. So this is just a little bit of background about Capital Edge. We've been working, I myself have been working for the city in Washington for 21 years, and prior to that, my predecessor, Barbara McCall, goes back a number of years before that. This is just pictures and little bios of us and our colleagues. And gonna hit really quickly some of the the major federal issues that we worked on in 2015 and into the past few months, is always funding for core local government programs, CDBG, home, local law enforcement assistance. I'll get into a little bit more detail, but those have taken some hits in recent years. Reauthorization of highway and transit programs, and we provided a summary. Congress did pass a 5-year, $305 billion highway transit intercity passenger rail bill. The Internet Tax Freedom Act, and actually since we sent this PowerPoint for it to be posted, the permanent Internet Tax Freedom Act was included in a broader customs bill that was sent to the president for his signature. So the permanent Internet Tax Freedom Act is unfortunately now the law of the land. And I can get into more detail, but it is tied in the next issue, sales tax fairness. That's one that has really come to the forefront in the past decade, but dates back decades, and that's the ability to collect sales tax from out-of-state remote retailers. Our champions on the sales tax issue in the Senate, Senator Enzi of Wyoming, Senator Durbin of Illinois. Not coincidentally, Senator Enzi used to be a mayor. I think that probably plays, but in return for allowing the Customs Bill and the Internet Tax Freedom Act to move forward, they got an assurance from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell that the Senate will vote on the Marketplace Fairness Act, the Sales Tax Fairness Bill, later this year. And I'm not sure how this is enforceable, but also got a commitment that the House would do the same. So we'll see if that actually happens. But I will, and not to get too off course in that subject, but I think we are closer than ever on sales tax fairness. Last summer, and I may have talked to some of you about this, the Supreme Court delivered an opinion in a small, narrow sales tax case, but Justice Kennedy took the occasion to write a concurring opinion where he rather eloquently said, I had my doubts about the Quill decision. The Quill decision is the Supreme Court decision that prohibits state and locals from collecting out-of-state sales tax. He said, I had my doubts about the Quill decision back in 1992. The changes in technology and the growth of online shopping have exacerbated those doubts. He says a case that was questionable when it was decided is all the more questionable now. And then he closes by saying, the courts should produce a case for us so that we can rule on this.
Was that Bella Hess?
It was Bellis Hess, and then the Quill decision, which confirmed Bellis Hess.
What's the total amount in South Carolina? Do you have that? Or
Do you know
Kyle,
that,
do you have
Joy? I should know that. That's terrible. It's
Taxes that are not collected.
Yeah, what do they think that it'll bring in South Carolina if we get this?
Is it 300?
Yeah,
And-
he was over 300.
Yeah,
How much?
and that number was
300 million.
from, I think, 2011, so that's grown certainly since then. And I'll move on. One that Mayor Benjamin has been actively, oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Benjamin has been actively involved in protection of the tax exemption for municipal bonds. Prevention of unfunded mandates, that's always an issue we work on. Unfortunately, disaster assistance towards the end of the year. An ongoing issue, Defense Department realignment and making sure that Fort Jackson is well positioned.
2019, a BRAC coming, is that what we're hearing?
Perhaps, tough to say, but I think there will be another BRAC round at some point.
It's been longer than 10 years, hasn't it?
Yes, the last BRAC was 2005.
Right.
Intercity passenger rail, and then just general funding and troubleshooting issues for the city. Those issues kept us busy the last year. They'll continue to keep us busy in the coming year, and also I think some opportunities, but also some challenges. The biggest issue on Congress's plate is the expiration of FAA programs. They were able to get one big transportation bill, the highway transit bill, over the hump, but FAA programs expire next month, actually. The House has approved a bill to reauthorize those. The House committee has. But there's a lot of disagreement over the future of air traffic control, and I think that's going to keep that issue tied up, and we'll have short-term extensions on that. And then, of course, every year they have to do appropriations process. Even though we have a budget deal, I'll get a little bit into the budget deal. The appropriations process is always complicated these days. In an election year, it will continue to be complicated by non-appropriations related issues. The Communications Act, they're not going to do anything on the Communications Act this year, but I think that next year Congress is going to start looking at rewriting the Communications Act, and that will, I think, create a lot of problems for local governments. We had a little bit of a preview of that this month. I'll get into some details on that.
John Thune?
Yes, Mayor Benjamin, I can get into that now. The Senate Commerce Committee had a discussion draft on a spectrum reallocation bill to reallocate some spectrum to open it up for the cell phone industry and earn the federal government some money from auctioning off that spectrum. And the discussion draft had a provision in it that would have included some pretty strong preemption of local zoning authority for cell phone towers and facilities. The conference.
Got all the authority they need now.
Yeah.
Right. As it is, I mean, the FCC preempted your authority on co-location to a large extent. This would have preempted almost all of your authority over those sightings. The good news is that the bill was introduced this past week, and that language is not in the bill.
We wrote a strongly worded letter.
Yes.
Of course, of all the states in the entire country where the U.S. Conference of Mayors does not have a member, it's South Dakota. And John Thune is the author or sponsor of this initiative.
Municipal Association Director in South Dakota.
Really?
He came out of, he was one of us.
So you're in charge of him now, okay. You found the person to be in charge of John Thune now. It's Howard, but you have the big spectrum, another big spectrum sale auction next month, right?
Yes, from
month.
previous legislation.
Yeah.
So, and then this is looking further ahead than this year, but next year we'll have a new president and a new Congress, and sequestration will be back. And I say sequestration will be back. This is going back a little bit. I'll try to do this quickly, but at the beginning of last year, Congress was looking at doing FY 2016 spending bills, and the president submitted a budget that assumed there was no sequestration. The House and Senate decided they were going to do a budget that had sequestration. Finally, in October, they came up with a budget deal that essentially split the difference, and they decided to call a truce for the final 2 years for FY 16 and FY 17, and they decided to throw $50 billion in extra money at the discretionary spending caps for FY 16, and then another $30 billion for FY 17 above the sequestration level. And that is why we were able to get an omnibus appropriations bill in December. And I think the momentum from that agreement also allowed them to get past all of the various policy and social policy riders that often complicate the appropriations process. And this is just, I try not to get too wonky here, but this is an important chart. The black line is the 2011 baseline for discretionary spending before the 2011 budget deal. You might all remember the fiscal cliff and the debt ceiling cliff when they reached a budget agreement. After they reached that, they imposed some cuts, and that's the orange line you see there. And that was where they took it. And then you remember the super committee, perhaps, which was supposed to come up with a budget deal, otherwise sequestration would take place. The idea being sequestration would be so terrible that they would come up with a deal. They did not. So then the blue line you see below there is sequestration. And then that little yellow line you see in between there is the old Murray-Ryan budget deal, and then the budget deal that was announced this past October. So even though we've had some relief from sequestration, compared to the pre-2011 baseline for discretionary spending, you can see why we've had some tight budget years these past 6 years. And did I skip a slide? Oh, no, I'm sorry. And the chart to the right is essentially shows you what sequestration has done. That's discretionary spending as a percentage of GDP, both looking forward and back a few years. And as a percentage of GDP, discretionary spending has declined considerably and will continue to decline under sequestration, which puts a lot of pressure on core local government programs. And that chart at the bottom shows you what that has meant specifically for Columbia. Overall, CDBG has been cut about 42%. That's community development block grants. The home program, rather, CDBG has been cut about 23%. The home program up 42%. Homeland Security and law enforcement, not as big a cuts, but still some pretty major cuts. And I think going forward in the sequestration environment, we're going to have to continue to push back against these kinds of cuts. Like I said, for FY 2017, they have a top line number. They've agreed to go $30 billion above the sequester level. So I think for FY 2017, most of these programs should be in good shape. But in the out years, with a new president and a new Congress, we're going to have some challenges here. Any questions about budget issues?
So that's 3.9 million down to 2.5 or so, is that about right?
I beg your pardon?
Looking at the difference between FY 2010 and FY.
Oh, total?
Yeah,
Yeah, give or take.
just in those four areas.
And particularly if you look at the CDBG and home numbers,
Yeah.
Just one question. I know it's kind of premature, but with the, I think the interest and the feelings to decelerate funding of the core local program, what kind of talk is going on in terms of replacement?
not much.
No.
Not much. And what's really happening is there's this sequester which has really hurt domestic discretionary spending in the last 5 years. But the other piece of that is that mandatory spending is taking up a bigger and bigger piece of the federal budget. That as the baby boomer retirement bulge hits, Medicare, Social Security, and also interest on the debt all take up a bigger piece of the federal budget pie. And revenues have really been reduced. So that's really putting pressure on discretionary spending, and within the discretionary spending on non-defense discretionary spending. So I think we are looking, when it comes to non-defense discretionary, we're looking at austere times for the foreseeable future. And we'll have to fight to keep those funding levels that we've held the line. After FY10, we saw some pretty steep declines. We've held the line since then, and we're going to have to focus on holding those going ahead. I will, on brighter news, I mentioned Congress passed a 5-year, they did pass a 5-year, $305 billion surface transportation bill. That came as a surprise to a lot of people. You might remember 3 years ago, they struggled to pass a 2-year bill after they did 20-some short-term extensions. This time, they found a path forward relatively quickly, enacted what's called the FAST Act. It stands for Fixing America's Surface Transportation. Of course, they were able to get to that 5-year, $305 billion level using some accounting gimmicks. As they looked at a 5-year bill in current spending plus inflation, they faced about a $75 billion gap. With any increases in the gas tax off the table, they had to find a way to pay for it. And let's just say that the pay-fors for this bill to fill that $75 billion gap were interesting, and leave it at that. Creative is a good word for it, yes. My favorite, actually, is withholding passports from tax scofflaws. It's expected to bring in a certain increment of funding to the Highway Trust Fund. But I just want to hit the highlights. It's a 5-year, $305 billion bill. In a lot of ways, it's a status quo bill, but there are some important changes in it. Most importantly, it includes, for the first time, an intercity passenger rail title. That's the first time intercity passenger rail has been paired with, coupled rather, with highway and transit programs. I think that's a significant change. I'm going to hit on just some high points for the city. The city and other cities fought and won expanded suballocation of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. We're going to grow the amount suballocated to urbanized areas from 50 to 55% over the life of the bill. The bill retains the Transportation Alternatives Program and retains suballocation of part of that money to MPOs. It retains a strong local decision-making process in the form of MPOs, and then important for Columbia, it retains the ability for CMRTA to use their federal grants for operating assistance. I mentioned in the broadest term, it's a status quo bill. It largely maintains the basic structure of federal highway and transit programs and funds them at current levels plus inflation. But like I mentioned, there's some changes and some opportunities. There's an intercity passenger rail title, although unlike highway and transit programs, that's subject to appropriations. So that will only be as robust as Congress funds it in any given appropriations year, cycle rather. There's language in the bill that might allow highway design standards to better reflect urban needs and priorities. Specifically, in addition to the manual, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials manual, the National Association of City Transportation Officials manual is now an official manual that can be used in federally assisted highway projects. There's a couple of new programs targeted at urban freight mobility, and also some opportunities to get creative and possibly fund intermodal stations and transit-oriented development in the bill. This is just a broad overview of how much South Carolina will be allocated over the 5 years of the bill. And those are the broad programs, and I'll translate those. On the far left is the National Highway Performance Program, which used to have the much simpler name of National Highway System.
Okay.
That's the bulk of the federal highway program, and most of that money goes straight to SCDOT and its other state DOT counterparts. The next one over is the Surface Transportation Program. Half of that program is what gets sub-allocated to MPOs, including Central Midlands. Two smaller programs, Transportation Alternatives and Recreational Trails. Half of the Transportation Alternatives get sub-allocated to the MPO. That's for pedestrian, bicycle, safe routes to school. And then across safety, rail, highway, grade crossings, CMAQ, metro planning, and freight. Apart from metro planning, are all the domain of the state DOT. But those are kind of the numbers. South Carolina will go from about $646.3 million in the last year of FAST's predecessor to $741.2 million in the final year of the FAST Act. This is the amount that will get sub-allocated to Central Midlands Council of Government from the STP program. This reflects both growth in the STP program and then, like I said, an increase in the share that's sub-allocated to MPOs from 50 to 51% over the life of the bill.
Not much increase.
Any questions about the FAST Act? We have a more detailed summary. That was one of the handouts we passed out, is a detailed summary of the FAST Act and the various programs in there. Any questions about?
Well, you know, I asked you earlier, in terms of municipalities that are looking to, one of the things that really helps is targeting areas for redevelopment.
Right.
Part of that is business recruitment in areas, corridors in particular. Tiger is so competitive.
So competitive.
And, you know, I had asked, what else could municipalities start to look at?
And on the infrastructure side,
Yeah.
at the federal level, the Tiger Grant Program, apart from the formula programs I just mentioned that come to the state and to the COG, on the infrastructure side, the Tiger Program is it in terms of competitive grant programs of any significance. There are some smaller
I mean,
programs.
those numbers there are small.
Yes, yeah, right. I mean, we celebrate the growth in suballocation to MPOs, but yes, I mean, we're celebrating going from 10.4 to 12.8 million, where, you know, the state is still looking at getting about 740 million. So the bulk of the program still goes to the state DOTs.
Right. All right. Mr. Mayor, that's something that I think we might want to try and see how we can sort of strategize and maybe help fill that gap, because there are a couple of corridors that right now mean the life and death of certain sections of the city. Tiger, so competitive, it's always a hit and miss for us. My concern is, what else can we go after to help fill that void?
Sure.
And based on trying to cut the seam again in terms of development, that is, to me, critical for the city of Columbia. Right. So anything we can do with y'all's help, I would be interested in it. I'm sure maybe the eastern part of the city also, because it's front and center now. You know.
And I'll say, I mean, in terms of Tiger's competitiveness, it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get a Tiger grant. Literally, I think the success rate last time was 5%.
Yeah.
Of all applicants were funded. So it's a very I will say, I don't, At the back of our funding chart and in this past week's report, we had a summary of the president's budget proposal. And he has a pretty bold proposal for surface transportation investments. It is, of course, I mean, before the budget was even released, it was declared dead on arrival by congressional Republicans. And I don't want to create false hope, but a lot depends on the outcome of the election. But that could be a blueprint for the next administration. And in some ways, I hope it will be, because it's heavy on investments in cities and metropolitan areas, and in directing more resources to cities and metropolitan areas, specifically to meet their needs.
And I will say this, I don't just say it because Ralph and Joy in the room, but we do have, I think, the best transportation lobbyists in the country with these guys. So the president's proposed budget notwithstanding, we probably do need to double back and look at all the existing. I mean, this is the last several months of administration, and I think a sense of urgency, a sense of
absolutely
of legacy, and we need to make sure that all those different possibilities we leverage these last several months. So maybe going back and looking at existing programs and funding.
Okay, thanks.
I'll hit, I don't want to take up too much, I'll hit really quickly on issues of local authority. The Internet Tax Freedom Act, that's obsolete, as we just discussed. We talked about sales tax fairness. So those are, I'll hit really quickly on the spectrum bill. I think we'll see more of that as Congress looks at rewriting the Communications Act. And then it's died down since the Omnibus Appropriations Act passed, but the issue of sanctuary cities and withholding federal funds from sanctuary cities, I think will come up again this year. And then I just want to really hit quickly, I don't think much will happen this year, but the issue of public safety and police community relations has really come to the forefront on Capitol Hill, and focusing on police community relations, sentencing reform, mental health, and possibly even comprehensive reform in the form of a National Criminal Justice Commission. Apparently the last one was in the Johnson administration. And this is just some...
Is that Andrew Johnson or Lyndon Johnson?
But the sentencing reform bill, I think for right now that's dead, and that would have been federal sentencing reform. Senator Cruz from the campaign trail has put the kibosh on that. But there is a lot of bipartisan interest in that. I mentioned the National Criminal Justice Commission. That's a bipartisan bill. Looking at some mental health reforms and more resources to address mental health issues, and then reauthorizing juvenile justice programs. And then in the House, the Republican Policy Committee has a law enforcement task force, so they're looking at these issues as well. I don't think anything concrete, but certainly something that Congress is interested in. And then really quickly, the administration is moving forward. It has an ambitious regulatory agenda. They issued a new ozone standard, 70 parts per billion, down from 75 parts per billion. Lexington and Richland EPA forecasts will meet that new standard, so you should be in the clear. But of course, no one knows until they actually measure. There's new greenhouse gas emissions standards for municipal solid waste landfills. The Clean Power Plan, last week the Supreme Court put a stay on that pending the decision by the Supreme Court whether or not it's constitutional. South Carolina was one of 23 states to challenge that. If it really now means if the Supreme Court upholds it, it's up to the next administration to implement it. If they don't, obviously it's back to scratch. Waters of the United States is another one that's working its way through the courts. Last year, HUD issued a new regulation, new final rule on fair housing and what the city has to do to affirm that it's furthering fair housing. And then any day now, I was expecting it a while ago, but the Department of Labor will issue a new overtime pay regulation that will bring a lot more employees into, a lot more managerial employees into overtime pay. Oh, that's okay. And that's our other handout is our funding chart, which just goes through the Omnibus Appropriations Bill and then the administration's budget on a program-by-program basis, highlighting funding levels for various programs of interest to the city. Any questions or anything I didn't cover?
I appreciate y'all's efforts up there. I think y'all have done an excellent job in getting us through the mud and helping to identify tax dollars to bring back home.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's-
We appreciate it.
I
Thank
think
you.
that's important.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you. Yeah, no, is there anything?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyle Michelle with our state legislative update.
Thank you very much. I was impressed that Ralph, look, he didn't cover all of this detail. He said he had a lot of detail. He wasn't kidding. That's pretty impressive. When we started our report this year, my assistant, I'm going to ask, no, I'm on the next, a different one. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. I'll back up and say thank you for allowing me the time to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to report. I appreciate the opportunity to work for the city for another year. Thank you very much. And working with Ms. Wilson and Ray Gray and Juana Faulknight and all the senior staff makes it very easy because they're all very responsive and professional in the work that we have to do together. As Ralph knows, I used to work at the federal level. The difference in the federal and the state is the state moves much faster. When they say we need these numbers to know what to put in the budget, they mean we need them in the next week or so, not in the next month. And the City of Columbia is a joy to work with. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing that Ralph did because I think we may have some questions and I want to leave room for questions. So let me go through this information pretty quickly. You guys stop me if you would like to, and otherwise we'll take the questions at the end. We've organized this somewhat chronologically. So last year, this is what the City Council approved as our priorities. Because of the flood this year, we are a little bit delayed in having this meeting. Last year, we had this meeting in December. The city approved these priorities for the legislative session. This year, we're having this meeting, obviously. This is the 6th week of the session, so we're having the meeting now as the session has gotten started. I'm not going to read through every one of these, but the one thing that I would say is that two things that were big 2 years ago, that we worked very hard against 2 years ago, have these asterisks beside them, and our work ensured that those things didn't come back. Those were things that were going to jeopardize a lot. The children's child care facilities was going to have a dramatic impact on the way that we were able to run summer camps. And the flow control issue, I think everyone in the room understands what that was. And we worked hard on those 2 years ago. Last year, we tagged them as things that we would keep an eye on, and they have not come back, and I don't expect them back this year. We have issues similar to that we'll touch on later this year. Last year, here are the highlights of what was passed that affected the city. Body cameras, as everyone knows, we've gone ahead and bought those with city funds. The way that the bill is set up, they are requiring body cameras, but only to the extent that you are funded to buy them. So you're more than free to go buy them as we have, but if you don't receive state funds, you don't have to go buy them yet. They trickled $3.4 million into the state fund last year. They will put that out on the street. The way the law is written, the City of Columbia can still apply for any of the funding that they put in the bill to reimburse us for the body cameras that we bought. We have not seen the House budget yet. We don't know how much money they're going to put in this year. This is the agendas for meeting bill that came, the law that came out of the Supreme Court decision a year and a half ago. This bill passed last year. It essentially requires that city councils have agendas for meetings, public bodies. These are the parts of the bill that sort of the highlights of the bill. This is sort of what council has to follow, the rules council has to follow on game day. So when you are in session, and there is a schematic on this that I can provide that I think you guys have probably seen that shows what you can do with items that come up during session how they can be treated and how you can get them on the, there's the schematic. And it works pretty well. Municipal Association put together. Transportation Network Company Act. This is Uber, as everyone likes to call it, the Uber bill. We negotiated a pretty good deal on the Uber bill. They did not want to have to deal with every jurisdiction in the state. And we did not want to have to fight them tooth and nail at every turn. What they essentially, what we agreed to was that we would get 1% of every fare that originates in our jurisdiction in return for them not having to pay business license tax anywhere. And if you do the numbers, we came out pretty far ahead of where we would have been had we tried to do it a different way. So that's the overall sum, the money, overall summary of the bill. They now report through the ORS, and we get our money from the ORS. I believe we get it quarterly. It may say it up there, but I don't remember exactly, but I think we get it quarterly. But it's a good deal for us. It's more money than is paid by taxi services, traditional taxi services. And Uber is just one of them. Lyft is another one. I'm not sure if they're in South Carolina yet, and I think there's a third one that's Sidecar that's emerging, right. So any of these will have to, any of these transportation network companies, as they're called, will have to abide by these rules.
Did the traditional taxi companies, were they a part of that discussion, to your knowledge?
Yes,
Like,
they were a part of it because they wanted to make sure that they didn't get
Right.
anything that came and affected them.
I know that's been a concern they've expressed with municipalities, so I was interested to know that they understood how that ended up working, and that you know, the way the funding really goes is equivalent or more from the
Right,
to the
right.
business license.
Yeah, no, the transportation network companies did not get off lightly in terms of the amount of money that they're paying, but they have a very elegant and streamlined regulatory system now. They just have to calculate and send it quarterly to one office for the whole state. And one of the things that was really interesting, and I can't remember exactly every detail, is that when we started talking about paying the 1%, depending in the municipal jurisdiction where the ride initiates. So if they pick you up on Trenholm Road in Columbia, it goes to Columbia. If they pick you up on Trenholm Road in Forest Acres, it goes to Forest Acres. If they pick you up on Trenholm Road in Arcadia Lakes, it goes to Arcadia Lakes. No matter where you end up going, it's where it originates. And so in the middle of those discussions, the folks from the state, ORS and the state, were saying, we just don't have any maps and GPS systems that are detailed enough to let us know what jurisdiction each address in the state is in, so we could be able to tell this. How are we going to do it? And the folks from Uber said, oh, don't worry, we've got that. And the state people said, can we have access to that? And they said, yes, we'll give you access to those maps because of how much detail they have in their work that they've been doing.
Another part of that compromise, though, was to give the municipal association and the cities in the state access to the state's GIS system.
That was right. That's part of that whole discussion.
And that's a big thing. There was a notice in the Uptown. I think I saw Ed's Uptown on his desk there. But we have to make sure that all of the data from the city of Columbia is entered into that, especially new annexations and all. So your insurance premiums and a lot of other things are targeted where you're located. And the better we can get those maps at state level, the more money we might be able to get.
Good. Did I skip one? Ban of buildings. This is interesting. You just need to know about this. I ran into a guy named Brant Branham, who's the son of former state legislator from Florence. Lester Branham. And he was working on this last year and asked me if I knew anybody who was interested in working on it with him, and I said no. And he said, well, City of Columbia's got that Babcock building. What do you think about that? And I said, no. City of Columbia is totally neutral on this. We are not going to take a position at the State House on a Babcock building on a state tax credit for obvious reasons. Well, he pushed this thing through along with the help of James Smith He might have had some other developers around the state helping him. I know that there are some buildings in Florence downtown that are previously state-owned buildings, and they're together, they're contiguous, and they were trying to get them to redevelop. So this bill did pass. It was an expansion of the Abandoned Buildings Revitalization Act. This was really the remarkable thing. In the entire state of South Carolina now, the historic preservation tax credits increased from 10% to 25%, which is really good and will help with the rehabilitation of a lot of historic buildings. But this will affect the Babcock Building and the work that Mr. Hughes is doing there, because it will bolster the amount of money that can be invested into that. So I wanted everyone to know about that expansion, and that will probably, that act gets expanded every 2 or 3 years as different things come up. The local government fund was stuck last year at the same amount. We have not seen the money on, it's 212.5 million. You can see the numbers there on what we received and what we would receive if it were fully funded. I believe the towns and cities receive 13.5% of that fund. The counties receive 86.5% of that fund. So we're not as impacted by the counties by the legislature's failure to fully fund the local government fund, but it would be nice if they would increase it. We don't know where that's going to be this year. We've had a number of discussions with House Ways and Means, but there's a lot of antagonism on the issue between some members of the Ways and Means Committee and some members, primarily the Counties Association, not as much of the Municipal Association. So we'll see where we end up on that this year.
Too bad Woody Brooks is not around.
He had 3.8 in his desk drawer.
Yeah. I don't think you know who Woody Brooks is, do you?
I do not.
Okay. I'll tell you.
Okay, now we went from the laws of last year up at the very top, enacted laws, and we went to the budget, and this is last year's budget and this year's budget, and now we're talking about legislation that did not pass last year, that continues to be a priority for the city. And the business license tax is one that everyone is aware of and has discussed and needs to be aware of. The Municipal Association has been working hand in glove with City of Columbia staff, other cities and towns staff, and Republican and Democratic members of the House primarily, but also in the Senate, to come up with business license reform. The main things that they're trying to do in this bill are right here. Create a uniform business license tax application, create a uniform business categories, make registration and payment of all jurisdictions available online at one place, have a uniform annual date, and neither increase nor decrease the amount of money that is going to any jurisdiction on business license taxes. We expect that legislation, we were hoping it would be introduced by now. We expect that it will be introduced probably not next week, but maybe the next, after the final review is done. And then we will track that along as it goes through the process. There may need to be some tweaks that are done to it. We're not certain yet, but I want everybody to be aware that this issue there is a resolution in sight, which will preserve city revenues and will take care of a lot of the issues that have been brought up by the business community, many of which are legitimate. The dilapidated buildings bill continues. Actually, the Senate Judiciary is meeting on it right now. It's on the agenda, which is where I'm going after I leave here. If anyone wants to know what the dilapidated buildings does, I'm happy to go into detail, but essentially, when we have a piece of property that the owner simply refuses to do anything to, it would allow us to petition a court to take over that property and to take it into the court's jurisdiction for making orders, because the city hasn't been able to do anything with it. That's after a lot of procedural. You're probably 3 to 4 years into the process of trying to get the owner to do something to their property before you could get to a court.
It will fit nicely with our new nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, I hope,
When are we gonna be talking?
I hope we can move faster than 3 years.
When are we gonna talk
The
about?
Yeah.
purpose of the local
Is that in committee? Where is it?
nuisance bills
Monday.
is to
He's
No,
talking
I mean,
about
really
I think
get
Mr.
some
Davis
relief
said
as soon
that.
as possible
Monday?
because of
Okay,
the
good.
impact on property values. House next door,
Absolutely.
house across the street.
Right, right. And I think that it's good that we as a city are attacking this issue from the local level, and this will help from the state level if we can get it passed. There are always property rights advocates who are very cautious about doing anything on this. It's kind of a little brother or a little sister, if you will, to the NRA and gun rights, property rights issues.
Don't mean to prolong this, but how would this impact local nuisance ordinances?
I think it would, I'm not 100% sure I would rely on Ms. Knox for that, but I think that this would be on a separate track. A nuisance ordinance would be asking the court to declare that the property is a nuisance, and that then the court would be able to.
Then it kicks into this.
And this is asking a court to take over the maintenance and upkeep of the property.
Yeah.
And the court could then direct that certain things be done to the property, and the court could even rent the property out if it wanted to and pay for the upgrades with the rent revenues that come in. The court could go in and look at the building. The court would appoint a receiver, and the receiver would then be the court's appointed talisman to go out and deal with the property and come back and report to the court, and then the judge makes a decision on what's best to do. So it's out of the city's hands. The city just asks the judge to take over because the owner has been non-responsive. That's different than a nuisance ordinance.
I know,
But they could work in tandem. This is the bill that came in last year. We had this bondsman bill. We're still trying to get that thing to move. We had some hearings on it last year. It may be stuck. I didn't hear any opposition to it, but I just haven't heard anyone trying to push it forward other than a couple of voices like ours and others who would like to see it passed. Transportation funding, I put this up there. It's a statewide issue. Everybody reads about it in the paper every day, but it is an issue for us in the city. Here are the issues that are under discussion, and the Senate will meet again at 10 o'clock in the morning to take up the transportation funding issue one more time.
Well, Kyle, Ralph got a FAST Act in Congress. Can you get a FAST Act in the
I think we failed on that one 2 years ago. Ethics reform, I've lost much of my confidence that ethics reform will be done while the current governor is in office. We'll see. As long as transportation is the issue of the day, it takes the heat off of doing this, and I have a feeling that this is going to fritter away again one more session, and probably again next year. We'll see. And then maybe something will be done in the first session of the next governor. Freedom of Information Act, this is also a bill that's under discussion right now, the creation of the Freedom of Information Act office. And the thing that really impacts us as a city is that we don't want to get any law that hems us into hard timelines that can't be met or that are too costly. So this is one where we're working closely with the municipal association and other towns and cities to try to get a bill that is acceptable to all sides, that won't get just shut down when it gets to the Senate because somebody objects. We may get this done this year. I think we are, but there could be somebody who doesn't like what we do, and we may not end up getting it. And then we have to also be mindful of the needs and desires of the Fourth Estate and balancing their interests in this bill. This was something that I just put down here because it was of interest last year, where Mr. Newton introduced a bill that would say that any of your records on any ordinance that had been read for the first time would then become a public record. Elected officials' documents on a bill that had been introduced or an ordinance that had been read the first time would become public documents. That has not gone anywhere. Larry Martin's bill on autopsy reports has been passed by the Senate and is in the House right now. This is the bill that I was saying that if we defeat this bill this year, it may not come back next year, but it may. We've been working on this for over 2 years. I can't remember how long. This is a bill by the veterinarians that we agree with most parts of the bill, but we don't agree with the parts of the bill that are going to require, that are going to take away the ability of our animal shelter, the City of Columbia Animal Shelter, to provide veterinary services to the animals that we have in the shelter and then to the animals that are adopted out of the shelter. We're also a member of a coalition of nonprofit animal services providers. And as part of that coalition, we oppose parts of the bill that would limit where mobile veterinary clinics can be set up. The mission of the animal shelter, the mission of the City of Columbia, is to have as few stray dogs, stray cats, infected dogs, infected cats, as few animal problems as possible. We believe the provisions of this bill would work against that mission. It's right now being held up in the Senate. If it doesn't pass, it has not gone through the House yet. If it doesn't pass by crossover deadline, it'll be dead for the year, and we'll see if it comes back again next year or not. Veterinarians have been pretty exercised over it for several years now. This morning, I had a discussion with Bill Herb Kurzman, who's the subcommittee chair, House Ways and Means, who's in charge of October 2015 flood reimbursements. That's one of the ones where we're looking for numbers. We are looking at a two-step way to be reimbursed. The first step is that the city gets reimbursed its cost share on every FEMA-approved expenditure. I think that with I think that, let me put it this way, I'm optimistic that when we finish this process in the House, that the House will have provided the funds for the city to be repaid its 25% cost share to FEMA. So anything that FEMA approved for reimbursement and they paid 75% of, that 25% would come. Don't put it in the paper because it hasn't come out in subcommittee. I mean, the House Ways and Means Committee will meet next week to discuss their bill and to spread numbers at the end of the week. But this is what we're working toward. We're working toward trying to have those documented FEMA costs, the local governments, not just City of Columbia, all local governments have their 25% share covered. The costs in addition to that are what's kind of in play right now. How much money in addition to that, those FEMA-approved costs, did you spend, would you need to be reimbursed to take you back to where you were on October 2nd, 2015? Not to take you back to where you want to be on October 2nd, 2018, but where you were 2015. That's something that we're working on now. At the end of the day, it's all going to be a fight about money. So we're going to have to see, if all the cities come in and they say, well, our FEMA cost share is $320 million, and then we need another $200 million to take us back to where we were on October 2nd. They're going to say, we don't have that much money. But those are the ways that we're attacking this problem, and that's the status of where we are right now.
And you're letting us know, Kyle, for example, when I've had to go testify or where Benjamin has been advocating, but I mean, we're ready to keep doing that because we feel very strongly about the canal, for example, being such a major undertaking that not only impacts the City of Columbia, but the region. And those were the discussions I know I had with the delegation members who were saying, you need to send us that because if there's any additional consideration for, more than the 25%, then that's what we want to take good direction and be prepared.
Right. Yes. And in the House, we're a little hamstrung in the House. We don't have any members of the Ways and Means Committee in the city, and in the county, it's Mr. Neal.
Yeah.
So, and he's not in the city, and so yes, the Senate has not taken us up to take this on yet, but we will be doing that. Yes.
Just on top of your head, you said all municipalities is applying for the 25% MAT or 25% whatever FEMA approves for all municipalities in the state. What is that number? Do you have any idea what that number might be?
EMD's trying to put that number together. I think the governor put in 49 million, and I have a feeling that it's closer to 80 million, but I could be totally off on that, because I don't know. I don't know. I just know that people say that City of Columbia had by far the biggest claim, but I know that there are, because of the canal and the 25% cost of the canal that we've spent. But I know that there are a lot of claims that are going to come in from a lot of different areas of the state. So I don't know what the number. I don't think it's over 100 million. Maybe they know something we do. We don't. Maybe it's closer to 50 million. We'll see. It's very difficult. As I was talking to Jeff earlier, and it's just so difficult to know what your costs are because you don't know exactly what FEMA's finally going to approve, and you don't know what insurance companies might approve in addition to that. But we're working through that process, and we're not any different from everyone.
Have you gotten a sense from the legislature and talked to some other folks who dialogue with the governor's office today as to where their leanings are as relates to hazard mitigation funds or other funds being used for property acquisition, and how much that might be? I've heard a few different numbers. I've made it clear to staff that I believe we need to have a clear policy decision that ought to be a priority of the city acquiring some of these properties that either repetitive claim or are clearly in danger of seeing this type of action again. I know several of my colleagues share that position. Have you got any sense as to whether or not the legislature feels that's a priority?
I think the legislature does, in terms of hazard mitigation funds. As I understand it, the governor has to request the hazard mitigation funds. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And then it comes down to the counties. The money would come to the counties for the counties then to distribute as they, is that your understanding is the way it works? What I have not heard is whether the governor is predisposed to request those funds or whether there may be some kind of hesitation in the same way that she did not want to request farmers, flood reimbursements for farmers from the federal level, which she could have requested it and the federal money would have come in to help the farmers, but she had a policy difference with doing that. So I have not heard. I can ask around on that.
I've had a chance to talk to some of you. You guys feel strongly about that as well, and support of that as well?
Yeah.
And I think we need to, if that is in fact our case, my understanding is the governor's office hadn't gotten from several counties across the state very affirmative statement as to exactly what they want and how they want it. And if that's going to be our direction, then we need to make it clear that that's what we want. And of course, we still have take the ball the rest of the way downfield. But if that's clearly the policy direction we want to take, we need to make that clear. So, please.
On the other part of that is if we could get permission to go ahead and spend that money before next October. I mean, we've got several $1 million worth of mitigations that we need to do with people that are hurting right now. And to have to wait until next October to get that authority from FEMA to spend the money in order for us to get reimbursed. If we could get a waiver from FEMA, maybe that's Ralph's position, or any ability to go ahead and fund those buyouts now and get reimbursed next October.
I think what we would want to check on would be whether there is any procedure for that, or whether that could be, whether funds, once you receive them, almost all federal funds will have some prohibition on reimbursing costs before a certain date. Sometimes it's before the date of the receipt of the funds, but in this case, it may be 12 months prior to the date that you can use these funds to reimburse eligible costs you've already spent back 12 months. We would need to check on those two things to know. But no, I wouldn't. I don't have a lot of clarity on where that process is. I know that I've been told by folks at the federal level that they're going to have to, at the end of the day, the governor's going to have to request the money, or the money won't come for whatever federal program it is. But we will highlight that and get back to you with some information.
And I think the procedure's in place from the state's perspective. It's in the event that the funds come, I think if you all have an interest and other municipalities or policymakers have an interest in expressing you know, how that procedure should be tweaked, then maybe now's the time to do that. But from what we've been told, working with our consultants and our staff, you know, there's a pre-app that's due when in October, April for in October. April for the pre-app.
For mitigation fund?
Hazard mitigation, HG.
And that's just a pre-app. They're just looking for what you possibly think is out there.
Okay. I don't want to run over too much on our time here, but I'm welcome questions, and I think this is productive because it gives me some direction as well. These are the 2016 Municipal Association priorities. Business license, local government fund, indigent defense and municipal courts, which I know Councilman Duvall wanted to note. This is something that is more back to Uber. It's not, I think it's something that came out of their meetings. It's not as high of a priority for us. The next one is roads, and then the roads again on the C funds, and then Dilapidated Buildings Act. Liens, collecting liens in code enforcement. That's the municipal association's priorities for this year. What I have proposed is the City of Columbia's priorities for this year, and I should say we, because it's a combination of Ms. Wilson and Ms. Gray and all of us working together, is the.
Kyle, we need to make larger fonts and point size.
I know, right? They need to do this. I said put it on one page, and now I'm paying for it. Local government fund, state funding of the costs. So this is, which we always do anyway, support the local government fund.
It's a smart board.
Is it going to do something to me when I do that?
Who knows?
A smart board and a not as smart guy. Flood reimbursement, which is a very high priority. Flood cost reimbursement. Annexation. I put this up here because Representative Bernstein introduced a bill week before last that would allow cities or towns to annex 25 acres or less donut holes, in essence. And we're pushing hard on that. We've been working to spread that far and wide and get as many co-sponsors as we can. We'll have opposition on it, but if we start at 25 acres, we might end up down at 12 acres or something. Anything that would allow us to annex by ordinance donut holes that are of a certain size, rather than
50 acres.
We did
Years ago.
right, and nothing is still passed, right?
While you're on that, it's kind of like a little gnat that's always. The 50 acres is fine. That there's no question about the impact there. But in terms of the smaller little lots, 1 building, 3 buildings, how do we? I think there's been some. I talked about some of the arrangements or agreements in the past through annexation laws when they were being administered. Property owners had an option, yes or no. And when we went back, for example, we went down a particular corridor to do some annexation about a year and a half ago. There were still folks that said no. There's nothing we could do. How do we handle that? You can't. It's not retroactive. We cannot go back and renege.
This law would do that. This law, if they got it to 12 acres.
Today, you cannot do anything to anyone who doesn't want to come in.
Exactly.
Under this law, you would be able to pass by ordinance. Council could pass an ordinance and say, we're taking you in.
Donut hole next door
if
or
you
across
were,
the street.
If you were 12 acres or less, maybe 12.5, completely surrounded by the city or by the city up against a state line or up against a lake or up against some other territory boundary.
That is what we need.
Right.
It would be very flexible.
Yeah. Right. We've been working to try to get something like this moving again for a while. So we've made that a priority. Erica knows how to scroll. I don't. Animal shelter bill continued to to oppose this business license practices supporting the municipal association. If we can get this business license bill worked out, we will have dodged a big bullet. There are a lot of conservative members of the legislature that want to cut taxes, and when they have trouble figuring out how to cut taxes at the state level, they think, well, here, I got an idea, we can go cut taxes at the local level. And so this is one that is a significant revenue source for our, not only our city, but every town and city in the state. And if we can work this out, we will have dealt with this issue, and there will be more that will come in the future, but this will be an important one to deal with, because there really are some problems with the business license tax and the way it operates. This is the Indigent Defense Fund, which we'll come back to in a minute. Monitor these issues for anything that may have an impact on the city. Support passage of the Dilapidated Buildings Act. Support legislation that will clarify. This is another bill that we're still trying to get introduced that would allow us to put city liens on the county tax collection bill. It's an issue that's been swirling around for a while. We're just looking for the right way to get it introduced. And then the bail bond reform legislation, which is still coming out of a couple of years ago at the mayor's crime panel. I'm over my time, and I want to be sensitive to that, but I'm happy to take any questions or to talk about that Indigent Defense Fund. Councilman, if you would like to.
I understand it now. Just see if you can straighten that out so the cities don't get triple taxed.
We're going to try to do that. The city of Columbia has reached an agreement, our court system has reached an agreement with the Richland County Public Defender to provide defense of indigents in the municipal courts. We have not reached an agreement with the Lexington County Public Defender because he has told us that he's not going to strike an agreement with us to defend Lexington County residents in those handful of cases where crimes occur or people are arrested and subject to the municipal court in that portion of the city that's in Lexington County. Think Harbison, that little piece that we have up there in the shopping district that's in Lexington County. We're working to get that piece straightened out. Today, the Richland County Public Defender is taking care of those cases for us.
She says it's straight.
I'm sorry?
Richland's gonna cover everything for us. They're covering everything.
They are covering everything. I'm not positive how long Richland can continue to cover the Lexington side.
told me they
Maybe
would.
they can.
I mean, that's part of it.
Okay, good. Good. So the city of Columbia, we've worked out that issue at the city of Columbia. We will still support the municipal association's work, but it's not something that is creating a huge headache for us at this point. So what we have done in the past is ask for council motion and resolution to endorse this, which gives me the authority to go forward and be fruitful and multiply on these matters.
I know it's not a, obviously we can move, and this is not a list of priorities. If someone asked this before I left the room, a list of ordered priorities, I would probably put the flood relief at the top of the list, personally. No exception to the local government fund, but the sense of urgency that Howard referenced as well. I just feel very strongly we have to step very firmly into the driver's seat and pushing for recovery because our citizens can't wait. So that would be the only change I'd make. Is that motion?
Anything else?
You want to move it?
Yeah.
Executive.
I'm putting a work session. Y'all have problems with it. I have no problem.
As long as there's no opposition.
Endorsing the priorities.
That's no problem.
And I would move we support the priorities that's listed by Kyle, with the exception of moving the flood relief to the one position.
Yeah.
Second. Discussion? Seeing none. With the previous question? Clerk call the roll.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Navarro?
Aye.
Mr. Bedore?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor
Say it again. Remind me to never go to the restroom. I just said how.
Kyle, thank you for all the hard work. The only other thing that I wanted to add, and Juana had to leave to get to another appointment, but we have really good advocacy internally and with our external lobbyists, and we have our own legislative tracking software and device that most of you are familiar with. You're probably getting emails for the 2 new council members. She can train you on that. You're familiar with it. It's the same tracking device that the Municipal Association uses, but she did leave some handouts for you all. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Kyle.
Our next item, Mr. Palin, financing options for Bull Street. I see our legal counsel and our financial advisor, so hopefully we can get through this gentleman by 4:50.
Kyle spent too much time on it.
He took up some of your time.
$70 million.
Plus.
Thank you. So you use your age down here?
No, that's not what that is. Very funny. I don't think she would have done that to y'all. That goes with it.
No changes. It's the same as what was on the website.
That one's
Or
here.
on the agenda.
Outdoor- yeah, what's that?
Did you see Mr. Davis out there? I saw him. Did he? Okay. Yes, it's PD. Why? You want something different? You still wait?
No.
No, okay. We'll go ahead and get started for our, 10th edition, maybe 11th edition on Bull Street. I know we have had some changes, so I wanted to start off the discussion on Bull Street. First let me introduce everyone that will be here. Gregory Tucker is our project manager. Gregory will be here. I know y'all may have some questions that talk about some of the projects that are going on out there, so he can answer that. We also have Michael Season with the McNair Law Firm. He's here. He'll talk with us some of the specifics, somewhat on our GEO bond issue and more focused on a TIF bond issue and the requirements that go into all of that. We also have Brent Robertson, our financial advisor with Stifel, and he will talk more about the numbers of the bond issues and how that'll look and how we would layer those out over the next couple years. I wanted to start off, I think every discussion for the last 3 years has started off with this page right here. This is a development agreement. This is just a reminder. I might turn it this way. This is just a reminder of, we had different infrastructure phases in the development agreement of the 5.25, the 7.9, the 2.1. Whoops. It's fine. Going all the way out. We're in phase 3. So I think the next phase starts July 30th. The end of July, that'll be starting phase 4, which is this infrastructure amount of 15.8. To date, we had Bob Hughes has not requested all of this funding yet, but he will be. My next slide is going to show the estimated spend. Gregory has worked with Bob to go through when he expects to request the numbers. So we know that we're going to be coming up to this phase for the 15.8 million, and on that you do have certain obligations that they have to meet in order to get that full amount, and it's all based upon past goals. The other part of the obligations outside of our infrastructure is our parking obligations, and it's for 1,600 spaces. We pretty much anticipate that to be in the form of 2 garages, probably over the next 2 to 3 years. I got it.
Oh, we set the meeting.
Okay. Okay, this is our update on the spend estimate. Last August, we showed you this, and we broke it out. Really need to get. Okay. On this is really where we're at, is phase 3. So we've broken it out, and these are our expectations of what they're going to be requesting from us. Next year, we roll into phase 4, so we're also anticipating it's not just going to be the 15 million, but an additional 11.3 million. All this is going to be for infrastructure. That's going to leave this additional 4.5 million. We've put this out here a couple years out. We don't know for sure. That could come in 17 or 18. It could come out later. There's no requirement for us to have to just force feed it to the developer. But he could ask for it really all next year, but this is our anticipation. Gregory has met with Bob. They went through the numbers as late as January 27th was the last meeting. So these are our most updated numbers. In addition to the infrastructure I just showed you, we still have the parking. Our anticipation is 800 parking space garage this upcoming year, fiscal year 15 or 16, 17. That's $16 million. We're still pretty good on that number. That would be $20,000 a parking space. And then we anticipate the next one could be in the 17, 18 year, possibly 18, 19 year. We have put in an increase in the price per space. That's more for our planning purposes, maybe more of a conservative look. We bumped it up to $25,000 a space, but realistically, as we roll into that, we'll be able to come back to you with better numbers. You know, if we're lucky, it still stays at 20,000. If we're real lucky, it'll go down, but I wouldn't anticipate that.
That's million, that's 20 million?
Yes.
20,000 a space, then 25,000 a space, and yes, the total amount would be 20 million. So this again is just a breakout of the different funding that pays for our infrastructure and parking. Over the last 2 years, we've budgeted $1 million in water, $1 million in sewer. In the upcoming year's budget, we'll recommend another $1 million in water, $1 million in sewer. So water and sewer will pay $6 million. That's towards water and sewer infrastructure projects. Stormwater's been $1 million 2 years ago, or $1 million a year ago, $1 million the current year, $1 million next year. That's a total of $3 million. That leaves us for other source for the infrastructure of $22,236,000. So we need to cover that gap. Then parking, our total estimate is $36 million. For a total of $67,236,000. That should pretty much match what we showed last August. Funding options. Some of us will remember June 2013. Michael Season, me, several others were up here. We had a very long memo. We talked about 17 different sources of how we could pay for this at the very stage. And we have comprehensively gone through many of these and gone back through, and we continue to look at these. Even when we present this today, we may have certain things that we're going to do over the next year, but if funding opportunities present itself next year or the year after, or maybe it's 3 years from now, especially for parking, we will bring those back to you. Nothing's ever written in stone until we've actually issued those bonds. Of those 17 sources, 4 of the items that we talked about were bonds payable from taxes. That would include hospitality, accommodations, capital projects, tax. Second one was bonds payable from revenues, be water and sewer, parking, and TIF. A third one was install and purchase revenue bonds. The fourth would be general obligation bonds. Last summer, or back in August, Council gave us direction to utilize installment purchase revenue bonds. At the same time, we also discussed that there would be other opportunities for other options to pay for it. During that time, we have had meetings with Councilman Plow, Devine. I've had discussions with Councilman Medora, the Mayor, and Councilman Duvall to talk about the various different things that we could look at. So we continue to research the alternative options in our new proposal after our discussions and incorporate a mix of the options, which would include a series of general obligation bonds to pay for our infrastructure costs that are in excess of the budgeted water and sewer and stormwater expenditures. So that would be that $22 million. And then a series of tax incremental financing bonds to pay for parking needs and part of the water and sewer needs of the infrastructure. So I don't know if I have it written up there very clearly, but just to understand, there was 22 million in GO bonds that are really to cover the infrastructure. If we're going to use a TIF, the TIF has to be backstopped. We've talked about this before by the water and sewer system. So there has to be some benefit to that water and sewer system. Michael Season will talk about that more at a later date. So what we've done is propose adding 4 million of our water and sewer system needs of the infrastructure out there into the TIF. So it actually lowers how much we have to issue in the GO. So now it looks like this. Our infrastructure, 6 million, water and sewer fund, 3 million, stormwater, 18.236 million in GO bonds over a series of 3 issues over the next 3 years. And then TIF bonds for the remainder part of the infrastructure for about 4 million. Then parking, we would look at the TIF bonds, and that would be for 36 million.
Is that me or is that you?
That can be.
Can I have a second?
Sure. Oh, I'm going away.
I'm sorry?
I'll be right here, so ask all.
Well, I can wait, whatever you want to do. I can wait. Go ahead. I'm looking at your funding options, and I know this council passed the installment purchase revenue bond back in August, and I think we've been talking about that. But I don't see that anymore in this picture. Are you trying to get away from it, or, because I did not see back. Go back one slide, because what I'm saying is, are we getting away from that?
In this proposal, it does not utilize installment purchase revenue bond. After discussion with several of y'all, for an alternative, one of the things that we did look at last summer that I think, caused some concern is installment purchase revenue bonds. While there is the capacity and you can pull revenues from multiple sources, your overall cost of funds, your overall costs over that, I think it was a 33-year period of issuing those, it was a higher total cost. One of the advantages, and our FA is here today, he'll talk about that as well and verify.
And I commend you for that. We appreciate you working with that, because I think that's a smart thing to do. Number two, and a couple of questions. When you talk about all the bonds that we're talking about taking on or maybe acquiring in a few months or so, what are the capacity on each one? What are the limits on how much more can we buy on GO?
And we're going to get to
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
learn how to use this.
No, that's all right. This is information which was in the presentation from last August. General obligation bonds, as you all know, are secured by the full faith and credit of the city. Under our South Carolina Constitution, there are 2 limits on the ability to issue general obligation bonds. One is if they are approved by, they're voter approved. The second is that the principal amount of the bonds that are issued, together with the outstanding principal amount of all other non-voter approved GO bonds, has to be less than 8% of the assessed value of taxable property in the city limits. That's what we call the debt limit. So we'll talk in the slides that y'all will see. When Brent gets up to speak, he'll talk about debt capacity, which relates to how much in principal amount can be issued or outstanding at any one time. Debt capacity is different from millage capacity, the ability to repay. So when we've talked about this in the past, we've been very focused on debt capacity. Excuse me. The city, up until 2013, had issued general obligation bonds to fund mostly rolling stock or medium-term equipment. So it didn't necessarily fund them for buildings, very long-lived assets. It issued them for 5 to 7 year periods. So the ability to issue general obligation debt up until 2013 was more or less dictated by the amount of GO debt that was paid annually. And since, as I mentioned, the last GO bond that the city issued for new money purposes was in 2013. So since then, there's significantly more debt capacity, which has resulted as each principal payment was made in June of 2014, 2015, and this year, 2016. Sometimes I've had a note here about bond anticipation notes. This relates more to millage capacity, the ability to pay GO bonds. Of course, when you issue a long-term obligation, there are principal and interest requirements. You're focused on the ability to pay starting as soon as the bond is issued. Many municipal issuers or local government issuers will issue what are called bond anticipation notes. Those are one-year obligations where interest will accrue on the obligation, but it's payable at maturity. And what issuers will frequently do is if they, assuming they have the debt capacity, the ability to issue under the Constitution, they'll issue a ban, and then when it matures, they'll either pay it off or they'll term it out, they'll issue a long-term GO bond in order to refund it, or they'll issue another ban. So they'll issue for another one-year period. Frequently, you may see a ban that's issued, and then at the end of the year, you see another ban that's issued, what's called rolling the maturity. So that's why I mentioned bond anticipation notes there. The ability to issue bond anticipation notes is the same as issuing GO bonds. The debt capacity issues are the same. The difference is when the debt service on the obligation is paid.
What's the cost of money?
Well, a ban is a one-year obligation. So the interest rate that's paid on a ban, this is probably a good question for Brent, the interest rate that's payable on a ban is significantly less than on a 30-year general obligation bond. At the same time, the interest that comes due is paid at maturity. So that you may see, let's just assume that you issue a $1 million ban initially for a project. At the end of the term, $1 million, which is the principal amount plus interest, is due, and if you roll it over, you don't issue a $1 million ban, then you issue a $1 million something. Right, exactly. So the one of the effects of issuing bans and rolling them is that the principal amount grows slightly.
And you're allowed to roll them over how many times?
Indefinitely.
Is that?
I think it's determined, now I will say that for, as a. Okay, I introduced a little bit of levity into the meeting. The legal answer is you could do it indefinitely. The real answer is, depending on what the asset is that's financed, you wouldn't issue a one-year obligation for 100 years to finance a fire truck, right? Also, from a tax perspective, if it's a tax-exempt obligation, your tax lawyer wouldn't let you do that. There would have to be some relationship between the obligation and how it had been issued, or how long the borrowing had been undertaken, and what.
Does it have any? I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Does it have any limitation on the life expectancy of the project?
Yes, that was well, both from. I would think from a reasonableness standpoint for purposes of how many times you roll it, as well as from a tax standpoint. When you roll a ban or do any refunding, you take into account the original bond that was issued. So even though you're issuing one-year bans, you look back at the first time that you issued an obligation.
Right, okay.
Also, last point, very important, of course, is that any bond, any GO bond that's issued has to be issued for a public purpose. You all may remember that in the GO bonds that were issued in 2013, probably 2013 was the first time, not only did the GO bond authorize the city to purchase rolling stock and undertake IT equipment upgrades and things like that, we actually built in the ability to issue a bond in 2013 for Bull Street. And there were findings in the GO bond ordinance related to, and it was general, so it related to all of the things within Bull Street, whether it was infrastructure or parking or land acquisition or whatever. But clearly, it has to be issued for a public purpose.
Sure. So this is.
This is picking up where Jeff had mentioned for the funding of infrastructure on Bull Street that we're talking about today. And this is on the GO bond component of the plan of finance. We'll talk about TIF in a little bit. So we've got a Series 1 that's funding projects in the amount of $9.6 million. That'll be issued, it's soon to be issued in June of this year. A year later, June of 2017, there would be an issuance to fund $6,590,000 in projects. And then the third series would be in 2018 at about $2.8 million. We're going to look at two ways of looking at the GO plan of finance. The first is just issuing long-term GO bonds, so 3 issuances of GO bonds. The second is going to touch on what Michael talked about a moment ago, which is the bond anticipation notes. So the Series 1 and Series 2 would be a ban rolled into Series 2, another ban taken out with Series 3. But we'll get into the details and we can talk numbers, and we can really get into the weeds if you like. Oops.
Twice.
Thank you. Okay. So why don't we start with where we are? Let's talk about our current debt profile. This is the city's total general obligation debt service right now, as of today. We've got several series of bonds outstanding. There's Series 2007A. Those bonds took out financing obligations related to Innovista parking garages, which were issued in 2006. Those were bans in 2006, so the city's used bans before. The 2011 A's, B's, C's, 2012s and 13s, those were all rolling stock bond issues. Those are very front-loaded debt service, meaning they're paid off quickly because the assets that were financed are very short-term in their useful life. So if we had a police car that was expected to last for 5 years, we'd finance it over 4, just to make sure we were staying well inside its useful life. The 2015s was a refunding bond issue that the city executed last December to take out the balance of the 2007As. So where the 2007As used to pay out all the way to 2027, those have been replaced with a lower cost of funds of the 2015 bonds. So that was a refinancing. So that's our status quo. All right. So what we're looking at here is, what if we issued bonds in June of 2016, so in just a few months from now? What you find is, you've financed your projects for the first component of the plan of finance, but what you see are these 2 purple bars up top. That's the payment of interest on the bonds. That's about $240,000 in fiscal 17 and $240,000 in fiscal 18. That is over and above what you're already paying on debt service. We are confident that when the bonds are sold, if council decided to do GO bonds, there would be sufficient original issuance premium that would offset those interest costs, that you wouldn't have to consider a tax increase or paying the interest from another funding source. Not a guarantee, but we're confident that we could get it. And what you find is, and this gets into the debt capacity, Councilman Medora, prior to the issuance of 2016 bonds, so this is in June of this year, we have debt capacity of $15.9 million. After we've issued the 2016 bonds, we have about $6.3 million left over. Well, but we're paying off a lot of, remember, we're paying off lots of principal in these years here, so you're replenishing it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yes, we're at 15.9 million and it drops down to 6.3, but we'll get to the next slide and you'll see how it kind of works together. The 2016 bonds is 9.6 million par amount, 4.9 million in interest, for a total of about 14.6 million in debt service over the life of the bonds. Now, as a footnote here, this plan of finance assumes a 30-year general obligation bond. There's no mandate that the city issue 30-year bonds. If you wanted to issue 20-year bonds or 15-year bonds or 12-year bonds, we've got the option to do that. The thing we need to be careful about is the current interest that we're paying on the front end here, and also the amount of debt service principal that we're going to have to fill in this area. If any of these bars that go above the current level right now, that's where we start playing a little bit closer to having to considering a tax increase, or finding the funding for the debt service from somewhere else. Okay, so that's 2016. 2017. All right, now we've issued our next series of bonds. We've got our 2016 bonds, the dark purple, but then you see we've got the 2017 bonds have their first debt service payment in 2018. That's interest only as well. That's about $170,000. Again, we're confident that we can get enough original issuance premium that would offset the cost of that, so we wouldn't be looking at a tax increase or another source of funding to pay that interest. The debt capacity prior to the issuance of 2017s, all of the city's GO bonds have June 1 principal payment dates. And so what we're assuming here is the 2017 bonds would be issued on June the 15th. That allows the debt capacity on the prior page, where it was about $6 million. As of June 1 of 2017, it goes up to $11.6 million because we paid off a good principal on it. After issuance of the 2017 bonds, it drops down again to $5 million. So the total debt service on this issue, it's the $6.6 million in par amount plus the $3.6 million in interest. That's about $10.2 million in total debt service. Good so far? Okay. Our final issuance is in 2018. The 2018 bonds don't have their first debt service payment until 2019. So the issue of the interest payment in that year is a moot point because it's well below what we're currently paying. Again, these are 30-year bonds layered on top of each other, for funding of Bull Street. The debt capacity prior to the issuance of the 2018 bonds is about $10.4 million. It drops down to $7.6 after issuance. The total principal amount of the last bond is about $2.8 million, 1.6 in interest, for total debt service of $4.4 million roughly. There's a gold shaded box on this page that I'd like you all to pay particular attention to. If you were to take the total principal and interest payments of the 2016 bonds and the 2017s and the 2018s, you would have issued a total par amount of $18.9 million in bonds, so let's say $19 million. You're going to end up paying about $10.2 million in interest for total debt service under this plan of finance of about $29.2 million. All right, so $29.2 million, remember that number. Because what we want to talk about next is the bands.
the bands are a less efficient way of funding these bonds. And let me tell you why. For the 2016 bonds, I'm taking current interest rates and I'm adding about a quarter point on top of them. We're in a very, very low interest rate environment now. There is lots of speculation and a lot of discussion that we're going to see more rate increases by the Fed. So I'm assuming we're going to have about a quarter point higher cost of funds in June for the first GO bond. In 2017, I've increased it by another quarter point. And in 2018, I've increased it by another quarter point. I mean, what I'm trying to show is a very conservative plan of finance that assumes a rising interest rate environment where you're funding three different components of GO bonds, 16, 17, and 18. The problem with the GO band is that you're kicking the can down the road. You've got that 1 year cost of funds in 16, you got the 1 year cost of funds in 2017, and then everything gets taken out in 2018 with one GO bond, one long-term GO bond. That's 3 years from now. That's 0.75% higher than current market. So you're taking out your total cost of funds in the GO plan of finance portion and putting it at a higher interest rate. Okay.
I guess you didn't like the what you're saying.
I just need a little, they're playing me off like the Oscars. Okay, so here's our status quo again, all right? I just wanted to start us off. All right, so we issue our first round of GO bands. Look at that, no impact on our debt service. Why? Because as Michael said, with a band, you roll it forward to the next year. The band from 2016 matures in 2017 and it gets paid out when you roll it. So the total debt service that's owed on that 1 year obligation in June of 2017 is about $9.7 million. And we do the same measure here of what our debt capacity is. It approximates what happens with a GO bond. It's pretty close. So here you are, where you've got a $9.7 million payment obligation that you owe in 2018. But guess what? It doesn't hit 2018 either, because you've issued a band in 2017 that takes out the 2016 bands and adds on top of it the new money component that you need for the plan of finance. So just to be clear here, the 2016 bands covers projects for Bull Street. Okay, a year later in 2017, the 2017 band covers the payment of the 2016 band and adds on top of it new money projects. That's why you see a total on this one of $16.5 million payout.
That's assuming we're not able to pay it off a year later.
Well, you'd have to come up with $9 million from somewhere. I mean,
Our payment now is right about close to $6 million.
yeah, but it would be $9 million on top
Plus
of
the
this.
6?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, it's a 1 year obligation. It'd all be due at once. But just stay with me real quick here.
Okay.
The reason why you would do the band is kicking the can down the road would be well, you do bands for a couple reasons. One is if you don't have millage capacity. Okay, that's a good reason for doing it on the GO side. If it was a revenue bond, like a water and sewer project, we're building a brand new water plant, and you're relying on revenues to pay the bond, it's going to take 2 years to build the plant. We're not going to get any revenues out of this thing, so we need to have some amount of time, 2 years maybe, to get the plant up and running to start actually generating revenues to pay debt service. So you would issue a band, and then another band, and then a long-term financing in the third year once the revenues are online with the water system. Well, that's not what we have here. We're not building a project that generates revenues, not in the common sense of the phrase. Another reason why you would do bands is if you weren't sure what your project costs were. Well, we think we need $5 million, but it might be $7 million. Well, why don't we borrow a $5 million band now, start building the project, and then in a year, when we figure out if we need $7 million, we can do a long-term financing and throw another $2 million into it. This is more informational. This is not the direction I would go, and I'll show you why.
Okay. Because I don't see the difference between that and installment purchase revenue bond.
Well, you're about to see the difference between this and the long-term financing using just bonds.
Okay.
What was the total debt service amount that I told you all when we were looking at issuing just GO bonds?
29.2.
Okay. We're talking about the inherent inefficiencies. The total cost of funds of doing it this way, 30.6. And the reason being is because you have pushed your total long-term financing into a 2018 bond that's at a higher cost of funds in 3 years under my assumptions. So this is more anecdotal. This is more for informational purposes. If the city were to do a general obligation funding component for Bull Street, the preferred method, I think, based on pretty conservative assumptions, would be issuing bonds. Long-term bonds, and then have enough premium to take care of those interest payments. Sir?
Brent, what would be the cost difference if you did one GO bond this year after a referendum, so it would not be put on our debt limit, and had the whole, what do we need, 29 million? What was the number?
31 and 4.
18.
Yeah, about 18.2 million in geo bond components.
Not parking, right? Well, if we're gonna go out for, if we want to go to a geo referendum and get people to approve this, I think we can show them considerable savings if we did that. Plus, we would have money we didn't have to spend right off the bat that we can invest.
So this is the long-term plan, assuming geo bonds only. If you did the referendum, would you want to issue all of the bonds now, or would you go ahead and get authorization from the voters and then only issue the bonds as you needed the money?
You got 5 years to issue.
Because here, there's two ways to
do it
think.
that way. I'd want to do it the most economical way, the cheapest way we could do it to save interest and save issuance costs.
The cheapest way, well, a couple things. The cheapest way to, well, see, that's a tough question. I don't know what's going to happen with interest rates, so you could make the argument of let's issue it all now while we're at the lowest cost of funds.
Right.
Yeah.
The downside of that is that if construction on Bull Street goes slowly, you've got all this money sitting in a project account that you're paying interest on, that you're probably not getting a whole lot of return on. I mean, you got to keep it pretty liquid to be able to stroke a check to contractors, pavers, whoever's actually using the proceeds.
I think you can do the math and decide what's cheaper. Is it to pay interest on it now, or take the chance of paying interest on it later?
Or what if we're 3 years from now and interest rates don't go down, they stay the same or they're even lower?
That's why you're the smartest one in this room.
I won't let Brett respond to that. From a legal standpoint, if you were to do a referendum, the question, of course, that would be answered, you can issue bonds in one or more series, right? So you don't have to issue them all up front. You could issue them in series. You do have to issue all of the bonds within 5 years of the referendum. And you do have to separate the questions. The question, different purposes. The Municipal Bond Act says that each question has to be voted on.
So parking garage versus infrastructure?
Maybe water and sewer versus electrical versus storm. I don't know. We had that discussion in a presentation we did back in the fall. I think very clearly parking and infrastructure is different. You know, we'd need to get together with the legal department about how comfortable we all were about the different types of assets that were all being put into the same project, which is Bull Street.
What do you think the savings would be by doing that? Not discounting the fact that we would have geo capacity that would not be counted against our 8% for other lending, but what would the savings be for the city in taxes if we did?
I'd have to run the numbers. I don't know off the top of my head. I think if you had, I mean, to Michael's point, if you had a successful referendum and you had 5 years to issue the debt, you can choose at that point. You can run the numbers and issue it all at once, like you're talking about, see what kind of savings we got, or you can phase it out like this. I mean, the only difference between this, I can kind of ignore the bars for a second. The only difference between this and the referendum in terms of phasing it out would be under what authority are you doing it?
Meaning a referendum bond and an 8% bond don't have different interest rates.
So even if, I mean, it's going to be the same cost of funds, whether it's 8% debt capacity, 8% authorized geo bonds or referendum authorized geo bonds, it's going to be the same cost of funds. So if you were to say, oh, what does it look like in terms of referendum debt if we phased it in, Brent? What does it look like? Take these boxes out here that talk about your 8% debt capacity. That's what the chart looks like. It's still geo bonds of the city. It's still phasing it out over 3 years. It's still borrowing only when you need it.
If we did it on one issuance, would we save issuance cost?
Oh, yeah. But then the question is what are you losing in terms of, I mean, what are you losing in terms of the funds that are stranded? You're paying debt service on a bond sitting in a project. But sure, for every bond issue that you do, you're paying cost of issuance. If you were to do just one, you would save on issuance costs. Absolutely.
But you're doing it, but you're suggesting 3?
That's the way the numbers have been run. There's so many different ways of doing this. We can do it just like Councilman Duvall's talking about and do one single bond issue as well. We could do one bond issue and we could shorten this thing up to, I don't know, maybe here, so that all the bars were exactly the same going across. I mean, there's so many different ways to massage it. The good side about it, if you were to shorten up the debt service in here is, wow, we're paying back our principal, assume it was 8% debt. paying back that principal a whole lot faster when we're replenishing our debt capacity. The downside is, the bars going across the top represent debt service. You gotta pay it.
So even if we didn't do the referendum, if we only did one issuance, we would save cost and just, we wouldn't need all the money right now.
You would save on cost of issuance. The question is that, what would it cost you paying interest on bonds sitting in a project account over some period of time when you don't need the money? But we can look at it. I'm happy to run those numbers.
Okay. But we still would be guessing on interest rates down the road.
Oh, sure.
So,
That's going up.
I mean, that's gonna be.
and so there's no lot, there's no lot.
I mean, these numbers would look a lot better if I just took today's rates and froze them.
Uh-huh.
You know, all these bars would be lower. I just don't think that's realistic. If you're asking me where I think rates are gonna be in 3 years, I have no clue.
With the referendum approach, what timing wise though, you know, we're,
I'm sorry.
I mean, the train's kinda out the gate.
Timing
So
of referendum.
timing wise, if we're doing this referendum and then what happens if, you know, the response is not what we would want it to be?
Referendum can be held at either a general election or a special election. You don't have to wait till November to do it. I think that in general, it's a 60 to 90-day process between the notices that have to be given to the election commission and maybe coordinating the ballots. Maybe 60 days is a better estimate.
90 days.
It's not, so let's say 60 days, let's say 90 days. The approval happens, you get the results certified, you issue the bonds thereafter. If you're issuing 8% debt, and I didn't talk about this from a timing perspective, but if you're issuing 8% debt, after the bond ordinance is adopted, there are initiative and referendum provisions in the South Carolina code, so you have to wait a 60-day period before you can issue your bonds anyway.
Right.
So, you know, assuming referendum were approved and assuming bond ordinance for 8% debt were approved, I think from a timing perspective, it would be about the same.
Okay, so here, and Councilman Duvall, you've raised another great example of why would you want to use bans. Okay, well, maybe we think a referendum would work. Maybe we think that that's the best approach, okay, but timing, gosh, we got this timing problem. Because we got to get breaking ground, we need those funds in hand. Another possible option, do a ban. Do a ban in 2016, take your time to inform voters, to make sure that the referendum process is, I'm going to look to Michael on the legal side of this, make sure the referendum process is conducted in a responsible, timely fashion, so that everybody's well informed. If it passes, take the bans out with a long-term financing later on this calendar year or before they mature. If the referendum's not successful, then maybe you do a GO bond in 2017 that takes out everything else so you're not rolling a couple of bans. And it's another option.
I think the ban is a bad idea. I think you need to get that out of your head, because I don't think this is
Not a
a smart thing to say.
Now,
I'm just saying.
I will say that, no, I'm not gonna argue with you. I
Yeah.
will say that if you don't get a voter approved,
Right.
then you can't issue $30 million of bonds today. They're
And
not the
I
debt
don't
capacity.
want to issue, you know, I think I would like to see, since we're continuing this discussion, I would like to see how the TIF would work if we take a TIF bond, you know, now or next year. Now, I think there is enough money in the reserve general fund that we can pay for the first 5 years worth of expenses if we need to. I don't think, you know, I'm not saying that would be the best thing to do, but it's a lot better than having a bond issue. But I do want to look at a TIF scenario into how, is that coming up? I didn't see it in the slides. Okay.
Wait, before we go to TIF, I need to put a little reality here. If we do a referendum and we are not done and have not issued a bond by the end of June, which I can almost guarantee you that is not going to happen. If we do that, we're already spending money. We all passed a reimbursement resolution last August. We actually brought up doing a referendum last August. We were not given any direction of any interest in that because it takes time to do this. We will have spent potentially between now and June another 10, 12, $14 million that's coming out of the general fund. That means at the end of this fiscal year, our fund balance is going to be down by that amount. And there is no, if we have not issued bonds, there is nothing out there. When we go and talk to the credit mark, to the bankers, to the rating agencies, when you get the CAFR, we are going to have a very, very, very depleted general.
Restate
Which
that.
is why I was asking about timing, and he's getting at the point.
I'm going to restate it again, because I want everyone's eyes wide open if we're going to do this. I have serious concerns of what we're talking about. Last August, I brought up whether we were going to do a referendum for GeoBond. We were given no indication that there was any interest by council because it takes time to do a referendum. I do not personally believe we can do a referendum and issue a bond before June 30. In August, we issued, or y'all voted on a reimbursement resolution which allowed the city to start paying Bob Hughes for the projects that's going on out there. Between now and the end of June, Gregor will back me up there, we're going to probably spend $11 million out of the general fund. If we have not issued a bond before the end of the year to reimburse that money, that means our general fund balance is going to be down by $11 million. That's how we're going to look at it at the end of the year. We will be talking to rating agencies. We're going to be talking to bankers when we start to issue any bonds. When those statements go out at the end of the year, that's not going to be a very pretty picture. I have a lot of concern of us trying to maintain our AA plus AA1 rating on our GEO bond, on our general fund, if we have spent all that money. We can tell everyone the grand story that we are going to issue bonds and reimburse that, but that is not what our financial statements are going to look like if we do a referendum. That was the point, and I will agree with you. The bans, those don't really make sense. Part of the reason we took a look at bans was whether or not there would be an issue of having enough premium to pay those first couple years of interest and not have a tax increase. Utilizing the GEO bonds, if you want us to extend it up and have only one issue, we can certainly take a look at that. We're still not going to be able to fit it all in. And the other issue is we don't know for sure at the end. If you go back to the page, clicker. Let's go back to this funding page on the timing of funding. This right here is $4.5 million. Now, we kind of broke that out between TIF bond, paying for part of it is water and sewer. We don't have it really broken out into any specific area. Any specific area, but Gregory and I have talked, and we can probably get most of it through water and sewer infrastructure. But there's no guarantee we're going to spend it here. If we issue here a bond for all of that, there may be concerns from a tax exempt side if we have projects that we can't realistically think we're going to be doing until, we hope to be doing it here, we could be doing it here, but we might not be doing it down to here, which is part of the reason why we kind of blow things up. And I'm not saying we can't do a referendum. I'm just saying there are consequences if we do it. We need to fully understand those because money through the agreement has already been spent and we are on the hook. It's come out of the general fund. That was the conversation that I believe you and Councilwoman Plow brought up when we showed the general fund balance back in December, was that we have spent general fund money that we will get reimbursed. The goal is to have something issued before this year is over, or everyone has to fully understand the consequences of what our financial statements are looking like. So that did Bud run out of the room?
Yeah, he did.
So when Bud comes, and talks to y'all next year, again, not against a referendum, but we fully have to understand what that possible consequence is.
Out of the 15 million, Jeff, what would qualify as water and sewer funding? I don't know, some of it I'm not, sewer pump, I would assume.
Well, our stormwater was 2.4 million.
But that's just stormwater though, right?
Relocated existing sewer in the blue is 1,120,000.
Okay.
Sanitary sewer potable water, there's another 1.9 or 1.17. Out of this amount over here, some of these we would be able to pull infrastructure out that would be water and sewer related. I don't know if we actually highlighted the colors, because again, this is an estimate that's more than a year out. So the estimates are only as good as the next estimate. So I get, anytime we start going out past the immediate need, I get concerned that there's going to be some changes. but we feel confident that we'll be able to utilize water, sewer, and stormwater funds within that amount and within this amount over here.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
before Jeff strokes out, I'll back off on the, I don't want to lose that seat. I'll back off on the referendum thing, but I do think we do need to look at maybe bunching those closer together so we don't have so much issuance costs.
And we can do that. What we may want to do is look at what's our total capacity then that's left, because I think after year one, Brent had showed you post-2016, there's a gap still of $6 million.
$6 million,
So we
right.
can still
Yeah.
squeeze more in. What we need to look at is, because what we've tried to do is to have no property tax increase. To do so, it's interest in that first year.
Well-
So we want to make sure that we don't get some number. See that little number there, that little purple? I don't want it to pop up all the way up here, because then it might not be realistic for us to issue enough premium to cover that.
So,
But I feel pretty confident that we can probably make that work.
Yeah, the other thing to be thinking about, Councilman, is when you look at what your debt capacity is, and I get it that, I mean, well, we've seen it, it replenishes pretty quickly in here, but another credit consideration is not just looking at your books. It's looking at what your capacity is to respond to emergencies or opportunities. And so when a rating analyst looks at your debt capacity that's down to 6.3 million, certainly we could issue another 4 million in bonds, kind of try to stay in a low interest rate environment. Right. The offsetting factor there is does it create some sort of a downward pressure on your rating because, ooh, your debt capacity, you're only at 2 million now. What if something came up? What if you needed 2 fire trucks?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's going to necessarily result in a downgrade. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there are kind of rewards and consequences. The reward being, you know, if we could compress into 2 bond issues, save on issuance costs, probably stay in a low, I shouldn't say probably, hopefully stay in a lower interest rate environment. Downside of that, are we skating a little bit too close to the edge on debt capacity? We'll just have to look at it.
well,
But it's worth looking at.
but the closer, you're saying that the closer the issuance, the lower the cost.
Hopefully. I mean, this is assuming a rising interest rate environment. We've been assuming a rising interest rate environment for some period of time, and it just doesn't seem to happen.
Where does the TIF come in?
Michael gets to lead that discussion, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, the GO stuff was the easy part. All right, that's mine, I think. Where? All right, we've been talking about GO bonds to fund the majority of the infrastructure. Excuse me. Tax increment financing. That's what TIF stands for. The biggest difference between GO bonds and TIF bonds are revenue bonds. So therefore, they're payable from a very specific revenue source. The TIF bonds are, as it says here, payable from incremental tax revenues that are generated in the TIF district. The TIF district is simply a legal demarcation. You draw a line around certain property. You don't see it when you go and look at the property, but it's on the tax map. And the property that's within the TIF district is treated differently than the property that's outside of the district as far as where the tax revenues go. Now, taxes are levied and collected in a TIF district and outside of a district exactly the same way. The same millage is applied for property inside as outside. The tax bills go to the property owners. They don't recognize any difference whatsoever. The difference is that when taxes are collected from property that's in the TIF district, that the taxes that are based on the initial equalized assessed value, that's a big thing, we'll go through it in a minute, are collected and provided to the taxing districts, the city, the county, the school district, the zoo, the airport, exactly the same as they were before you set up the TIF district. But the taxes that are collected that are based on the amount of assessed value that's generated above the initial equalized assessed value are separated. They're put into a separate fund called a special tax allocation fund. Those amounts are used to either pay redevelopment project costs or used to pay debt service on obligations that are issued under that are secured by the TIF district. Okay?
Well, yeah.
The initial equalized assessed value is simply the assessed value for whatever property is in the TIF district at the date that it is established, adopted.
So with the case of Bull Street, your tax value
Zero.
right now is 0.
Right.
So
And
anything that we generate is going straight to debt recovery or debt.
Or projects, yes, that's right. From a, wait a minute, what? Okay. Oh, okay, makes sense. All right, the limitations in the statutes, all projects that are funded in the TIF have to be publicly owned. That doesn't mean that they have to be owned by the city, but they do need to be owned by a political subdivision. They should either be located in the TIF district, and most projects that are funded with TIF bonds are located within the four corners of the TIF district. But if they're outside the boundaries, then outside the boundaries of the TIF district, you have to prove that they do benefit the TIF district. So it's possible to do that. I've never done that, quite frankly. The TIF bonds can be combined with, they're payable from incremental tax revenues, which is what I just mentioned, but they can be combined with or additionally secured by other revenue sources. In the TIF statute, there is a section that says that if part of the proceeds of the TIF issue are used to improve a system that is located within the TIF district, then the revenues from all or part of that system, whether they're generated in the TIF district or not, can be also secured to pay the obligations. A great example is, and this is something the city has done before, the city issued TIF bonds for the Congreve Vista TIF in 1986, when that district was set up, used part of the proceeds to fund water and sewer improvements. Those bonds were secured by incremental tax revenues, but they were also secured by a junior pledge on the water and sewer system. When the bonds were refunded, there was a new bond issue that was done in 1994. Those bonds were secured by incremental tax revenues and additionally secured by a junior pledge of the water and sewer system. When those bonds were refunded in 2001, same story. They were additionally secured by a junior pledge of the water and sewer system. That's kind of legally, that's the reason why it can be done. Brent will talk about from a credit standpoint why that's necessary. I think Jeff, we have been assuming for years that any bond issue, TIF bond issue that is issued within the city limits is going to require some additional pledge, especially if there's no incremental tax collection history. History. If I click again, will it move up? There you go. Okay. History. The city actually has a TIF, actually has two TIFs. One TIF was adopted in February 2010, which includes Bull Street as part of it. That is known as the Columbia Renaissance Redevelopment District. The original redevelopment plan authorized $40 million of bonds total to be spent on projects located wherever they are in the TIF district. The list of projects, there are two lists of projects. There are projects that are listed by asset classes, infrastructure, water and sewer, sidewalks, roads, things like that. They're very general. But the TIF redevelopment plan also describes specific projects, one of which is Bull Street. Others are things along the North Main Corridor, Farrow Road, Columbia College, and such. Gonzales Gardens, I think, was also mentioned. So the TIF, the redevelopment plan that exists today, it authorized $40 million of bonds, and it noted that the project for Bull Street would represent about $20 million of that. The original redevelopment plan had a 25-year term. It was adopted in February of 2010, so it expires in 2035. As of today, less than 19 years remain. When it was adopted in February of 2010, the county and the school district did not consent to the TIF. So only as we stand here today, only the city's incremental tax revenues could be used to secure the TIF bond. In 2 years, skipping ahead, in 2012, there were discussions by the city with members of the county and the school district. There were discussions about executing intergovernmental agreements with those parties, the city, the county, and the school district principally, to use 75% of each of those entities' incremental tax revenue. So not 100%, but to use 75% of everybody's for a 15 consecutive year period. There was a very sort of convoluted formula that was in the proposed intergovernmental agreement that the city would have 20 years to figure out when it wanted the 15-year collection period to be, but at the end of the day, the city would only be able to access 15 years of incremental tax revenues for all three of those parties. So, we have a TIF, a redevelopment plan in place. The proposal, I suppose, for purposes of today, is that the existing TIF plan, in its current form, does not provide the capacity to accomplish the improvements that Jeff talked about earlier, the 2 parking garages and the water and sewer infrastructure. And to sort of make the point, the reason why the water and sewer infrastructure is included in the financing plan is in order to access the junior pledge of the water and sewer system to permit those to be marketed. So there are 3 things that have to be done. Number 1, the TIF plan only has 19 years left. The numbers that Brent will provide or will show are for a longer period of time. A 19-year period is a very short period of time for any bond. I think even when we were looking at this in 2010, we were assuming that there was a 20-year total period. But obviously you can make better use of or deploy better resources resources in a more efficient capacity if you have a longer term to use. Increase the borrowing amount for Bull Street projects. So we mentioned before there were only 20 that were identified in the original TIF plan. We've, between the water and sewer and the parking, I think that represents $40 million of project cost. The proposal, of course, would be to increase the principal amount to something greater than $40 million, because you'd have to cover, you may have to cover capitalized interest, you have to cover probably a debt service reserve fund, issuance cost, those kinds of things. I don't know what that number is, but it's more than $40 million if that's what your project costs are. And then, of course, the most important thing is to secure the consent solicitation by the county and the school district. We've been asked at certain times whether we can amend the current plan or we can adopt a new plan. From an approval standpoint, to change the existing plan or approve a new one is about the same steps. You have to prepare, there has to be a resolution by city council, there have to be notices given to the taxing district, you have to prepare the redevelopment plan or the amendment to the plan. You have to approve an ordinance that approves either the amendment or the, so from an approval standpoint, you don't save any time by doing the amendment. It is important, however, this last part, the initial obligations have to be issued within 10 years. That's a requirement in the code. Since 6 years have expired since the original plan was adopted, I do have some concerns that if you amend the plan, you only have 4 years to issue your TIF bonds, and the statute is very clear that if you don't issue your first series of bonds within 10 years, poof, your TIF district just disappears. And I think that would be, and at least in my mind, that would be an argument that you'd want to adopt a new plan.
But according to Jeff, we need the money to yesterday.
I understand that. I understand that. Well, we also adopted a plan in 2010. So, but my point is that would be an argument in favor of adopting a new plan. I don't see any downside with adopting a new plan. I think that the things that you have to prove from proving blight still exist. I mean, you have to prove there are 5 factors, and there are things like inadequate utilities and infrastructure. Yes, sir.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Whether you implement, well, your timing doesn't allow you to implement it now, because you say you have to come back to the table. Are you, what would be your version of a revised plan? Now, the original plan, the one that you're describing, the Renaissance, was not just limited.
That's right.
To Bull Street.
It covered a significant amount, North Main, Farrow Road.
And my question is, are you, or would you recommend the same language, the same areas for benefiting from the TIF, or are you recommending that it be downsized?
So, property can only be in one TIF district. You can't have property in 2 TIF districts at the same time. So you're either talking about removing Bull Street from the existing TIF. You're talking about keeping the boundaries of the existing TIF, the CRRD, or you're talking about adopting a new TIF district that only covers Bull Street. I suppose there are 3 alternatives. Of course, that's a decision by council about what projects you fund, where they're located.
But there was a specific purpose for designing the first one. And I wouldn't see just doing it only for Bull Street.
That would,
given the need for redevelopment.
Yes, sir. The 2012, there were extended discussions with the county and the school district, and I think it's fair to say that that discussing the TIF district as being such a significant amount of size, and with part of it in Bull Street and part of it a significant amount outside of Bull Street, it seemed to be something that prevented forward progress. I think that if the goal is to either approve or amend the TIF district as quickly as possible to secure the participation and the consent of the school district and the county, I think that a smaller TIF district is going to be an easier road to hoe. But that doesn't mean that you'll get their consent.
But if you do that, then we don't take care of the needs that we intended to take care of.
That's correct. That's correct.
I mean,
the projects that were outside of Bull Street would have to be funded through some other source, either a TIF district that related to those other areas, or other general fund revenues, or grants, or loans, or whatever. They would not be funded from Bull Street.
And the other thing to keep in mind, even if we do not do this, that existing TIF district is still, if we haven't issued bonds to do something in 4 years or less now.
Clock's still ticking.
The clock's still ticking, then it just disappears altogether.
Right.
So that is going to be, I think, more of a policy discussion that y'all are going to have to let us know what you want. What we have brought to you is more a focus on our direct obligation with Bull Street today, focusing on parking. It's very important that we have partners. Brent may speak a little bit about this as well because of where the funding is, but it is important that we have partners of the county and the school district. Our part of that 520-some mills is only 18.4% of the total tax haul. So without them, we will not be issuing very large bonds at all. So we're kind of caught. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of how we're kind of stuck.
Do you want to talk about, these are the steps. I mean, I already talked about the things that council would have to do. Do you all have any other questions?
Jeff, what do you mean by caught or stuck? You mean we have to have consent? We have to have consent of the
Oh, but yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
TIF,
But we don't have to do that.
TIF, however articulated, requires consent of the school board and the county council.
If we're going
That's
to have
what you
their
mean.
participation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Okay, so what are we looking at here? It's one slide. It talks about the entire TIF plan of finance. This is parking only. So what this assumes is that there is funding of $18 million of parking and a little bit of water and sewer mixed in there, as Jeff talked about before, in 2017. And then the following year, there's another bond issue for $22 million. Again, mostly parking and then a little bit of water and sewer. So that's a total of $40 million in TIF bonds. These are assuming 30-year obligations. So as Michael said, there are 18 years, how many years left?
19.
There's 19 years left. So whether by amendment or whether by starting over again with a new plan, if council elected to go that way, this is assuming these are 30-year bonding scenarios. So we would need the TIF plan to actually be longer than 30 years, because if we adopted it in the first year and it was only 30 years, great, the first issue we can amortize over 30 years. The second year, we've only got 29 years left, so this big red bar here, instead of putting all that debt service in that last year, you'd have to force it into all these other red bars here, which would push them all up. So it's very, very important to remember, if you want 30-year bonds, you gotta have a TIF plan of finance that goes longer than that. And of course, our partners would have to sign off on that as well, to the extent that they were willing to participate. So it's 30-year bonds. Here's another very, very important aspect of this. This assumes a backstop of the water and sewer system. We're gonna need the backstop of the water and sewer system for this to be a financially viable option. Is it possible to sell TIF bonds? Is it possible to sell them without a backstop? Maybe. The problem is that it's pure speculation from a credit standpoint as to what's going to be invested at Bull Street, when it's going to be invested, private taxable investment, when it's going to come on the tax rolls, when it's going to actually start producing increment. We can run all these projections out, but there's no history out there. Bull Street has been sitting as Bull Street for decades. So there's no history of growth and values out there. Even though we've got things that are coming, again, even though they're coming and we see them coming and we're confident from a credit standpoint, you're not going to get the benefit of that. So what does that mean? Could you sell the bonds? Maybe. But what you'd end up seeing is these bars here be a whole lot higher, because that's the credit risk. If I'm an investor and I'm talking to you as a council, and you're telling me all these great things, Bull Street's going to have this, and Bull Street's going to have this, and all these investments are coming, and we know that it's all coming. My response to you is going to be, great, then you shouldn't have a problem putting the water and sewer system behind it. Because that way I know the money's coming. Because you got a monopoly on water and sewer, and it's an essential service. In theory, you could raise rates to pay TIF bonds from water and sewer revenues. That's the credit backing on this. That's what we're looking at here. It's a backstop of the water and sewer system that provides for AA ratings on the TIF bonds. So what you're looking at is a bond issue in blue, represents the first funding in 2017, with the first debt service being payable in 2018.
Correct.
Second, sorry.
What's important, though, we backstop TIF bonds always with water and sewer.
1986, 1994, and 2001.
Always.
Always.
Okay, so let's make that clear. That's not unique,
No,
this
this is not
situation.
new.
We've always, okay.
This is not a new aspect, and actually, I think it's.
Cliff started writing really faster over there. I just want to make sure it was clear.
It's also specifically provided for under the Constitution, isn't it, Michael? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not a new concept either from a legal standpoint or from a past practice standpoint of the city.
Yeah.
You know, the determination now is whether or not it's good practice going forward.
Are there any other enhancements we could use, any other securities? I mean, are some of these
Your best credit, your water and sewer.
LLCs? I know that, but what?
Not really. You know, in the past, you might have set up a debt service reserve fund, and then you'd say, well, subject to annual appropriation, if the reserve fund gets hit, if we issued these TIF bonds and we've got a year's worth of debt service, one of these blue bars of money sitting in an account, and we got the timing all worked out. Hey, if the revenues don't come in, we'll hit the reserve fund, then we'll go to council and subject to annual appropriation, we'll get the money from any legally available funds. In the past, that might have flowed. In the past, that might have worked. The problem is with Act 388, you're restricted on how many mills you can raise for operational purposes, and that would be considered an operating mill. So the whole strength of a reserve fund replenishment pledge, all the teeth are out of it now. So that was probably, Mayor, the best option that you had in the past. Special source revenue bonds used to benefit from that type of pledge in the past, and it's just not available anymore.
You could use a municipal improvement district on the front end.
You could, but I think you would, I don't want to get on the legal side of things, but I think you would need the approval.
Consent of the property.
The consent of the property holders. Which effectively what that means is that he's going to have, it's not a tax, but it's an assessment that he would have to pay on the front end.
He doesn't own all the property, the state owns.
What about?
Well, that's the other point.
Well, I mean, backstop.
I'm putting your colleague on the phone, Ms. Devine wants, she's out of court and would like to join in on the discussion.
What would the potential revenue look like from a privately built garage?
Hello? Hey,
TIF
Ms. Devine.
revenue that would go back into
Hey.
the garage itself.
You're
Is that
on,
possible?
we're in the middle of the, Bull Street
Co-developed garage.
financing
Privately owned
discussion.
on the tax roll.
Financing options, we're wrapping it up, should be.
Where we only put in a certain amount.
Oh.
No, I got that.
Well, I mean, obviously, the prospective tax revenue would still be undocumented for several years, but if it were privately developed garage, and we've looked at
We've looked at
200,
No,
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at, I mean, at 520 mils, 6%, if we owned half of the garage, estimated at what's the cost?
20 million,
20
16
million,
on the
so-
first one.
So if we looked at some type of a privately developed garage capturing the half that is private and maybe not the other half being public, you're looking at what? So 40 million, 520 mils is about 1.2, so about a fourth of that. If you're capturing a fourth of that, if you're capturing that revenue with a privately owned portion of a garage, does that serve as potential enough revenue to help debt service this? Not, maybe, it still may not be enough to
it
avoid
might not be.
a junior pledge or some type of backstop, but what does?
Well, quarter of 1.2 would be about 300,000, so that would help offset what the payment is. I don't know that we could use it as the collateral for it, but it would be an addition, it could be used towards the payment. Would we be looking at setting that up, the property as a fee in lieu of tax? Is that what you're suggesting? So that
yeah.
way, the tax, all of the taxes or some percent of that would come off and go towards the debt service.
I just think we have to be incredibly creative. We're talking about prospectively delivering on thousands of spaces without getting overly specific across the city.
And one of the things that will complicate the very first garage is through the license agreement with the baseball stadium. We have revenues, there is a revenue requirement that will go to the baseball stadium. So the first garage is going to be a little bit different than every garage after that.
So gentlemen, we are behind schedule. Are you looking to give any type of,
Come back.
feedback, or, I know, it doesn't sound like you're ready to give direction, but.
No.
you-
Well, I like the idea of a TIF. I think it needs to be restricted. I think it needs to be small, just on the 185 acres. I think it needs to be focused on parking, and if the mayor can come up with a public-private thing, maybe we don't have to do this. But
point?
I think
of
we,
key
I'd like us
components
to
and-
continue to discuss the TIF option. It's not, I have a heartburn the way it's being proposed.
Yeah, we've talked, and we're trying to get a meeting set, parking staff and Howard want to participate. As we look at all these different options, the reality of potentially looking at public-private partnerships to deliver on parking, I have no interest in expanding the city's footprint in the parking business. I do have an interest in having thousands of more spaces to accommodate and complement economic growth across the city. How that's delivered is of less importance. What is important to me is that we build it, or it get built, and that whatever our initial costs and more importantly our long-term finance costs be reduced. So I want us to be as creative as possible, and that's why I put that thought on the table. I know we've been trying to get a meeting set to look at those various options, but I do think that some private sector folk can probably build it cheaper than we can. We can finance it cheaper than they can. At least they say they can, Jeff. But looking at all those options, particularly, again, looking at minimizing the potential long-term costs. So.
Let me ask this as a question then, because there's we really have two parts that we have to finance. One was the initial infrastructure that we talked about on the GEO bond. Second part is the parking, which is in the TIF bond. If we are going to move forward on the GEO bond side, is there something that we can start, because there's still a process for us to do that as well. So I would kind of like for us to start that process on the initial issuance of the GEO bond. We don't have to determine the exact amount yet, but we need to get an ordinance. There's a 60-day period from the second reading to the end of that ordinance, and for us to issue in June, that means we need to get that second reading through by early April. And it takes a lot of work to put this together. So if we think we're going to do the GEO bond, because we need to do that in the next couple months, the TIF bond for the parking, we still have time to work on that. When we roll into July, we will probably look at parking the same way we did the other infrastructure and look at a reimbursement resolution so that we can spend that year. If we have to start spending money because of our obligation, we can at least give ourselves some time during the year to initially figure out how we're going to fund it.
Well, we need to have some indication, if not today, very soon, because we're spending money and we've got to be able to know the direction. If we clearly are hearing, I think consensus is not installment purchase revenue bonds any longer, which is why we went in the other direction.
I would be willing to support the GEO bonds that we discussed at first without a referendum, and have the staff look at seeing if reducing the number of issues would reduce our total cost, do it as economically as possible.
And realistically, I know we showed 3 bond issues. I think we can do it in 2 and keep it still within the 8% debt limit and probably keep it within having zero, I shouldn't say it, but I hope to keep it with zero effect on the property taxes coming in as well. I think we can do both. I don't think we can do it in one, only because it'll still be the 8% amount, but we can push more of it, of that third issue and more of the second into the very first issue, so that way we'll get the current interest rates, and if rates do go up over the next year or two, that way we'll at least put more of it at a lower interest rate.
You're talking about minimizing or zero impact on the taxes coming from the development?
No, zero tax increase.
Okay, yeah.
No, we want taxes from the development.
Exactly.
And I'll be talking with the staff and we'll be presenting to council as the budget process moves forward, but there is another high priority project as far as I'm concerned that we really need you all's consideration on. And it may be that bond issuance we're involved with that. Jeff is aware of what I'm talking about. Will this have any impact on that?
This could have an impact on it. If parts of that project were going to be rolled in there, we would want to figure out how we roll it in here.
AMI, I'll just say it, automated meter. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So I don't.
AMI, that'll be water and sewer. So that'll be coming out of more, that will go to our CIP in the water and sewer. That will not have an effect on this at all.
I I need to talk to you about which project you're talking about then.
She on the road?
Talk offline.
She's on the road.
She is on Mr. Vine. Oh.
Anything else? Good times.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hopefully, Mr. Addison will also be able to get through his presentation in 15 minutes or so.
So we agree not to take action on this session.
I don't want to
Give that
shortchange
to
the
him.
process
Read
of
it.
discussion.
No,
I'm
that's all right.
willing to
Read it. I want you
to
to read
reschedule in the interest of time, or if it's council's pleasure, we can continue this afternoon.
So moved. What was that, Bud? I apologize.
I said, I know you're significantly behind schedule, and there's an executive session scheduled after this, and then a council meeting after that. I'm willing to do it at a different time if you think this needs more than the time your council allotted today. But that's your choice.
Bud is declining to make it.
Bud
will come back in the next work session.
I've got significant questions. If we see by the yellow tabs.
Well, in that case, I don't know that he has time, but maybe we should just delay 4 and 5, because I know Ms. Flower wanted to be part of the review of the physical budget schedule.
Well, I mean, there's not.
I mean, I think it's best to go ahead and go in executive session, because we always, rush.
I want to make a statement before we do. And Tamika, can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Okay.
There's a lot of echoing. We're hearing from your part. You don't have your windows down, I wouldn't imagine, do you?
Yeah.
No.
No, okay.
But I hear echo too.
Okay.
I probably need to call into you because when people call me, sometimes it's an echo.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm pushing it down. Let's see if you can hear him when he starts. I'm pushing it down towards him.
Yeah. And I'm going to be brief, and I'm going to be frank. As I left home this morning, my wife told me to behave at council meeting. I'm going to. Did your wife give you the same advice, Howard? We've had several meetings, and the only people have been involved in this discussion today have been me and Mr. Badura and Mr. Duval. I've not yet. Howard just happens to be sitting right here, so I've not talked to Mr. Davis or Mr. McDowell, or of course Ms. Devine and Ms. Flower are not here in the room. We've made the issue of water sewer transfers a heck of a political football here at City Council. This council voted in 2013 to cap transfers from the water sewer fund at 5% to reduce it by $250,000. Voted again in 2014 to reduce it by another $250,000. Voted again in 2015 to end the general transfer that we've had and replace it only with a safety transfer that represented another $1.4 million reduction. Also made the decision to take the development corporations and the Office of Business Opportunities out of the, no longer take it out of the water sewer fund, but to move it over to the general fund, representing probably about $6.1 million in diminished transfers from the water sewer fund. Staff has been working at our direction, prepared to present a budget this year that shows zero transfers from the water and sewer budget, would represent nothing but those indirect items that naturally would be covered from the water sewer fund, representing staff time and costs dedicated to the utility. And we've had this issue, and it's been an incredibly, and I don't want to say divisive issue, because I think at times certain items need to be discussed. You can't avoid talking about important things just because they may make the discussion difficult. But each of those very significant moves we've made, we've done them with a divided council. I'm prepared to make a motion, and just in the interest of full disclosure, the reason I mentioned this is because I mentioned it to Mr. Badura and Mr. Duval today, prepared to make a motion that the city would eliminate all general fund transfers from the water and sewer fund, except for those costs which are periodically measured and determined to be actual costs incurred by the general fund to be attributable to water sewer systems. To also include in that motion that the city will determine the source of funding to offset any previous transfers from the water and sewer fund to the general fund. And also that the city would keep whole or increase public safety funding in the 2016-2017 budget from the general fund. The reason that we eliminated the general fund transfer is because it was time to move in that direction, but we replaced it with a public safety transfer, recognizing that not only are our needs there significant, but they are growing. And the needs, as many of you have talked to our police chief and our fire chief, is that we need to make a commitment not only to prioritize public safety funding, but to make it clear that just as we're making it crystal clear that we will not no longer transfer funds from water and sewer, that we will also secure and not decrease funding to public safety in the city. It needs to go up, not go down. And this habit of continuing to do this fighting, when I've talked to each of you individually, and everyone is unanimously in support of ending the transfer. And I think everyone's unanimously in support of funding public safety. And let's just do it and stop fighting about it and arguing about it in the press when that dissension is not there. It's an opportunity to move forward. And I mention that because I'm prepared to make this motion at Mr. Duval's request, and it was not my own volition, so I will make it clear. I offered to Mo if he would rather make the motion, and he said he doesn't feel comfortable doing so. I want to make sure that whatever we're articulating, and obviously I'll let you speak if you care to as well, Mo, that we recognize that not only is public safety a priority and the needs clear here in the city, we recognize the hard work that our city staff and all of our employees and this council has been doing over the last several years. This has been a work in progress, but I think a Herculean task. That at times has struggled to gain even barely a majority of support on this council. We're here now at the 1 yard line. Right. And I think the importance of going ahead and moving forward, we got more than enough. Just what we looked at today, from Bull Street to flood relief to everything else, we got more than enough to say grace over. We got more than enough to debate and discuss and figure out how to solve problems. I don't think that we have the bandwidth to sit here and fuss about an issue that is indeed not an issue worth fussing about. So I renew my request, the ability to be the author of record, Mr. Badura. I mean, if you so choose, let's knock this out. Let's take care of this as a council and move forward unanimously to make something happen.
And Mayor, thank you for making this, to resolve this. And I think everybody's, we've delayed this a couple of times, and, up to my surprise and everybody's surprise, Leona's trip to Houston was what delayed this motion or this resolution from being voted on for tonight. And I appreciate the comments you made and the motion that you passed to me. I just want to make sure, and I made a couple of corrections, that the funding for public safety using general fund resources shall be a priority.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to make sure that it's part of this resolution. And the two paragraphs of the two, whereas in my own resolution in the R 2016-15, it actually came from the CAFR report that we were about to go over and review. So it's not like I'm making anything up in my own resolution. So, I mean, if you're going to make a motion, I'll move to make a motion to approve resolution 2016-015 to end the transfers of water and sewer funds to general fund and continue supporting or funding public safety out of the general fund as a priority, as the resolution states.
Is that a commitment to keep public safety whole, not a priority, but to not reduce public safety funding, which I think is.
I never
gotta be
said
clear.
anything about reducing public safety funding.
I know,
Yeah,
but
but it has to come from general fund.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, I think we agree on that. So we're.
Without any
agreeing.
transfers. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, so the phrasing is, the city shall make a priority
Can we
and
make
keep
a motion on
whole or
resolution
increase.
2016-15?
Do you understand the question I'm asking you about public safety funding?
Yes, sir.
And he agrees with that.
No.
Yeah.
No, specifically stating, not that it'd be a priority. There are a whole bunch of things in the budget that are priorities, but not funded as such, that we will not reduce public safety funding. So
I would not reduce public safety.
keeping it whole or increasing public safety funding.
Okay? Funding for public safety as a whole or even increased using general fund resources shall be a priority.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mr. McDowell.
Just for the sake of clarity, and because we are engaging in this issue again, is it possible for us, the resolution was taken off of the table.
Yes.
We've reintroduced it now in form of a motion. Is there any way we can, I think just for clarity purposes, I agree with what you're saying, and I also agree with what the mayor is saying. I'm gonna move that we go into executive session for 15 minutes.
We can't do that.
No, not on this issue.
Well,
We can't.
all right, let me ask you this then. If we can't do that, what would have been appropriate for us, since it was taken off of the table, off of the agenda, is to amend it and make it a part of what we're talking about?
Well, my purpose was not actually to take up the resolution that was on the agenda tonight. Under our agenda today, we had a presentation from from Mrs. Kaufman on our budget schedule as moving forward. And the purpose was to use that as an opportunity to talk about our priorities. I've articulated ad nauseum that this discussion should be had as a part of our budgeting process anyway. And it keeps popping itself up, and it's been the typical punching bag. The challenge that we're facing with, and Mo, please take this in the spirit in which it's offered.
Yes, sir.
The opportunities to reduce the transfer in 2013, 2014, and 2015, some of our council members voted in the negative against those reductions in the transfer. We are now at a point where we can actually do it. And if we're going to do it, it needs to be done, again, in the spirit of cooperation. My only concern, and the reason that we replaced the general transfer with the public safety transfer, that we also articulated in the policy would be reevaluated every single year, is that we want to make a collective commitment that public safety funding would not only be prioritized, but would not be reduced. And that's the only amendment that I have now.
Is that a part of what, is that a?
It is not.
I'm sorry.
It's not. Right now, it says to be prioritized. But as an issue, I know you're a parliamentarian, Ed. I'll take it however we can get it. The way that this is drafted, not read through the entire thing, also seeks to recognize the fact that not only are we dealing with the aftermath of a flood, but we're also benefiting from the hard work of this council and the staff for the last several years. This gives zero recognition to the hard work that our staff has put in to getting us to this point. And I think that requires some type of recognition. I mean, so whether it be now or be at some point we take this up, I believe that we need to say thank you to the people here at the city that this transfer, which at one point was potentially 8 figures, is now at a point where we can take it to 0 because of the hard work of the men and women in this room. And I think that has to be recognized.
Yeah, and I think you're right.
Yeah.
What compromise do we make? You're saying priority, you're saying, Mr. Mayor, you're saying.
Well, 2 things. One is we guarantee that public safety funding will not be decreased. And secondly, that some of this language, and it's very simple. It's in the first 2 paragraphs there, Ed, that recognizes the work that our staff has done along with this council in reducing the transfers for the last couple of years be recognized in the resolution. Because I think it's ignored and I hope not intentionally so. And all the other language can stay, and all the other language can stay in. I'm fine with that. But Mr. Duval.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of things. I don't think we can take up a resolution that's been taken off the agenda under the rules of amendment.
That was not my intention. My intention was an independent motion.
I think that the councilman can make a motion.
That's correct.
And I think the wording of his motion is very close to what you wanted. It might not have all the bells and whistles of thanking the staff, but to get this issue behind us, I think we can agree that we want to stop the transfers and we want to keep hold of public safety funding, whether it's priority or keep hold and increase.
I appreciate that, Howard.
One other thing, Mr. Mayor. I also think that one reason this was debated, this was talked about amongst some of the council members, is that we felt that the staff needed some direction on how to draw up the budget for 2016, 2017. And we had not been involved in any discussions directing the staff to draw up a budget without transferring money out of the water and sewer fund. So as far as I knew until last night, there was not any direction from council. I know that the mayor is in the office all the time, but you don't have any authority to direct the staff to do anything on the budget without council approval, because this is not a strong mayor form of government. And we have to agree on what we want to do with the budget. Now, Mrs. Kaufman has drawn up a budget. If she's been somebody's drawing up a budget, and
we drew it up last year for the first time. The city manager's budget last year, we already reduced it to zero.
But you have to,
so we don't need the direction.
But you have to have direction of council on where you want to go with the budget priorities. And as far as I know, this council has not had that discussion.
Because you haven't been to your follow-up retreat, which is what we've all said, that I've continued to say. And I've maintained that I think all of these discussions about priorities here and priorities there are misplaced until you have a collective discussion, as we've said we were going to have on February 29th. But the direction, Mr. Ball, with all due respect, for the past several years is that we were, as a staff, to decrease the transfer. And the very first budget I submitted last year reduced the transfer to zero.
Well, I think that is good, and I think this council wants to do that, and I'd like to get it over with.
Okay.
Let's Sam.
You're attempting to insert your parliamentary skills.
I don't know whether or not they're skills or not. It's 5:10.
Yeah, let me say this. We're at a point where this discussion is not going to go any further. It ends today. Just for my own comfort, I think it's fair to let everybody know that even when I first came on council, that figure was very, very high. But there has been a concerted decision based on actually really the type of discussions we've been having prior to this in terms of finding dollars and also listening to the public. Because and I think we all know that once you get into some financial obligations and commitments, there's certain things you don't cut off immediately because you're obligated. But I do agree that we're at a point where we just can step over the line. The verbiage between my two colleagues is, to me, one and the same. We're at a point where we can go with the intent right now and move forward, and I think the public will applaud.
I'm going to call for previous question.
All right. Repeat the wording of the.
And I would ask you.
I move that the city shall eliminate transfers to the general fund from the water and sewer fund, except for those costs which are periodically measured and determined to be actual costs incurred by the general fund, but attributable to the operation of the water and sewer system. That the city shall determine the source of funding to offset any previous transfers from the water and sewer fund to the general fund, and that the city shall keep whole or increase public safety funding in the 2016 to 2017 general fund budget.
That's good.
So moved.
Okay. That was a second. Let's do the previous question.
Even though we're not supposed to vote in work session, I'll let you go.
Then it wants to.
Well, but let's. I think the key here is I think the point that is the issue that brought us to this point.
And I would
That
say that the additional language, we're voting, Madam Clerk, but the additional language was simply to say thank you to these folks who've been busting their butts.
Thank y'all.
To get this done. And that was it. I mean, because I think we gotta be careful, not just, I mean, and so it's not just Fallout Howard, it's not just Windows Rest, it's saying thank you. I mean, so but in any event, that's my motion. Clerk, do the previous question. Call the roll, please.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Aye. I know you can't vote, Tamika, but you feel pretty good about it?
Yeah, I thought the motion or the resolution that we passed before did allow me to vote.
No, y'all took that out in committee.
We did.
But anyway,
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Now,
Okay.
okay, so
Is there, so we gonna take up this budget schedule or not?
All it takes all of 5 minutes for Missy to go over the budget schedule if you would like for her to,
I'm
if not.
fine with it as articulated on the
I think we're fine, the memo that you sent, so.
Okay.
All right,
I would
we're
just
good.
add, the point being, we have to follow the dates in order to get first, second public hearing dates. And that really directs the rest of our schedule.
One other thing I'd like to suggest is that at some point, we need to have the committee of the whole, which is the whole council briefed as to where you are. Not a 5-minute briefing, but give us some updates on where you are with the budget process.
Well, let me say this, for the 2 new council members. We always do this, we give you the schedule. What we haven't ever done that I keep hoping we'll do is get the priorities set, and then our budgets are being prepared as we speak, or really prepared, have already been prepared by departments. Then we begin to have work sessions with you all. We bring back, I mean, it's in the memo where we're bringing back the various funds.
That's good.
And so it'll be a detailed discussion, Mr. Duval, during the work sessions with the various funds. But we did give you the updates, yes, sir.
Good.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Move we adjourn to executive session.
Motion to adjourn to executive session.
Second.
To discuss, no, we gotta do this, discuss employment of employee, the legal department, fire department, receipt of legal advice which relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim. All the matters covered by attorney-client privilege, the South Carolina Public Interest Foundation and William DePass Jr. versus City of Columbia, Richland County, and discussions of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of property. Moved by Mr. Duval, second by Mr. Davis. With the previous question, clerk call the roll.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Fedor?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell?
Aye.